He compressed space itself to create a black hole, and wiped an entire army of dragons off the face of the earth. He resurrected the dead like some kind of god, and turned the immortal vampire queen into his personal pet. But to the rest of the world, he was nothing but trash. Labeled a defective mage, he was humiliated and banished from his own country, all because his magic was supposedly only good for making invisible walls. What those arrogant idiots didn't realize is that his power literally bends the laws of physics. He can deflect any max-level spell and slice through S-rank monsters like butter. Trained by the legendary witch of the underworld, his soul carries more weight than any living legend. And now, the same kingdom that tossed him aside like garbage is about to find out what happens when you piss off the barrier master. The story kicks off with the spoiled prince telling our protagonist that he has no use for a defective mage who can only cast barriers, telling the kid to get lost and kicked out of the party right there on the road. Our protagonist explains they had just cleared a dungeon when he got kicked out of nowhere, leaving him totally stunned, while the noble asks if he didn't get the message, repeating with disdain that he's useless to the group and needs to leave, leaving the young man shocked and unable to understand why they're being so ungrateful. The arrogant blonde warns that tomorrow they're facing a high-difficulty dungeon and he'd just be a burden, glaring down at the mage with superiority while bragging about his bloodline. That arrogant jerk is the crown prince of the kingdom and holds the legendary hero class, a title meant to defeat the Demon King that became nothing more than a status symbol after the monster fell, so much so that the king forces his son to conquer dungeons just to build clout for his succession, making our protagonist get assigned as a royal bodyguard even though the prince thinks he's dead weight. The young man recalls he was always stuck with the ungrateful nickname of defective mage, all because the only ability he can cast is barrier magic, being incapable of using any other type of spell ever since he was born. The noble boldly claims he's gotten way too strong and doesn't need any protection at all, reminding him that he defeated all the dungeon creatures with a single strike, asking mockingly if he even took a single scratch from the monsters, leaving Riku clenching his fists because he knows the real reason behind it. The prince draws his sword, claiming someone with his skills doesn't need some cheap shield. But when our boy tries to argue that he always provided cover, the guy tells him to shut up, rubbing it in his face that casting barriers is the kid's only pathetic talent, making Riku agree while trying to explain the true utility of his craft. But the hero screams furiously, saying he doesn't want to hear excuses from anyone. Calmly, the young man explains that he kept barriers around the camp so monsters wouldn't even come close, revealing that he placed invisible shields on everyone's bodies during combat, making the prince burst out laughing, saying a barrier is just a basic dome that anyone can cast, while our protagonist fires back, insisting his magic is versatile and gave the team crucial support. The spoiled brat mocks him, saying he never felt any barrier shielding his body, reminding him that the kid got accepted into the Royal Academy despite being a mere commoner, graduated with the highest grades in history, and became the youngest of the 12 court mages, but in reality turned out to be a complete defective product. Riku insists, saying he only activated the defenses to make sure nobody got hurt, but the blonde yells, accusing him of using useless spells that nobody asked for, asking with disdain if the kid actually cast anything in his entire life, leaving the young man stunned in the face of such arrogance and utter ignorance. The noble claims that barriers are invisible, so it's easy to pretend you did work, while our protagonist reflects that people with low magic aptitude really can't see shields, watching the prince accuse him of lying about his spells just to travel along with the party, spitting venom as he claims the kid was only looking for easy money. Riku looks down, admitting that he really did join the court for the cash, thinking to himself that the royal salary was the best option for a steady income in his life, since he needed that steady money at all costs to support the ones he loves, while the blonde curses him out, calling him a greedy freeloader looking for a free paycheck. The young man grits his teeth, remembering that he has to support his family, but the prince scoffs, reminding him that he's just an orphan with no family in the world, making our protagonist remember the humble orphanage where he was born and raised, a very poor home outside the capital that completely relies on his donations to survive. And as he looks at his teammates helping someone will show some common sense, the man in the dark cloak says that scamming the nation for cash is the absolute worst behavior. The bald guy accuses the young man of buying his court position with bribes and favors, and the third member mocks him, saying a mage who can only raise barriers is an unprecedented disgrace, showing our protagonist that none of them have the slightest appreciation for his hard work. With a wicked grin, the prince declares the young man's expulsion from the party, and goes even further, pointing his finger to announce that he's banished from the entire kingdom, catching the young man completely off guard with such an absurd order. The blonde rants that the mage stole taxes paid with the blood of the people, claiming that a fraud who lies about his powers has no right to live in this country, giving him a deadline of 10 days starting today to pack his things and disappear, coldly warning that he's being generous before he gets executed for illegal trespassing, turning his back and telling our boy to get the hell out of these lands once and for all. Riku stands frozen in the rain watching his former party walk away without looking back, taking a deep breath in total shock at the sheer cruelty of that sentence, unable to believe that he'll have to abandon his own homeland. The young man despairs, realizing he'll never be able to visit the orphanage where he grew up, heartbroken that he won't get to see that sweet girl he loves so much. Deciding he won't just take this unfair fate lying down, and will try to clear up this whole misunderstanding, remembering that his only hope is to request an urgent audience with the king, hoping to get the monarch to step in on his behalf when a loud crash tears through the sky. A gigantic reptilian monster drops from the clouds, opening its massive jaws to swallow him whole. But Riku stays focused and activates his magical entrapment barrier right on cue, forming a flawless dome that stops the creature's sharp fangs like it's nothing. In a rush to keep moving, our protagonist says he has no time to waste on annoying pests, activating his barrier transformation into attack form number 5, conjuring a colossal energy spike that pierces the monster from the inside out, slamming the beast's body into the ground without giving it a chance to react. Noticing the beast is still breathing, the young man sets up attack form number 2, firing off multiple barrier blades that slice the entire creature to ribbons in midair, sending the monster's remains crashing onto the road as he clears his path. The kid stares at his fingers, reflecting that he really only has an affinity for barriers, but makes it clear that his creations possess an incredible versatility, serving both to raise impenetrable defenses and to wipe out threats without mercy, mastering offensive, defensive, and support variations to handle any situation. But before he can even catch his breath, an entire swarm of dragons appears, blocking the view with deafening roars ready to attack in a pack, making the young man sigh in annoyance at having to fight right when he's in a hurry. Bringing his palms together to unleash the true power of a barrier mage, gathering a massive amount of mana around his body as he prepares Secret Technique 2, activating the Void spell to wipe out every single threat in the area at once, releasing an insane blast that disintegrates the monsters in the blink of an eye, making the rain vanish and clearing up a blue sky as our boy looks up calmly. 140 kilometers southwest of the capital of the Geta Niga Kingdom sits the quiet countryside town where our protagonist grew up, called Myoko, where Riku walks down the streets lost in thought with his head down. The young man keeps walking, buried in his worries without paying much attention around him, taking slow steps as he tries to process everything he just went through, until he accidentally bumps into a man who instantly starts yelling and asking where he's looking, complaining about the kid's grumpy face and demanding an apology right in the middle of the street. But a firm voice cuts in right then, demanding to know what's going on over there, making the bully freeze up upon seeing that it's the respected Lady Flare, who arrives commanding respect in her mage uniform, listening to the man stammer as he tries to claim the kid bumped into him without saying sorry. The girl calls out his rudeness, saying he didn't need to be so aggressive, especially towards someone who was clearly down and carrying a heavy mind. The guy apologizes to her, but the blonde tells him to apologize directly to Riku, reminding him that he was also at fault for the bump. Our protagonist stays humble and apologizes for his carelessness right away, causing the passerby to walk away feeling awkward down the street. The young woman then flashes a radiant smile, welcoming him and mentioning it's been a year since they last met, with Riku letting out an awkward little chuckle and agreeing with her, thinking about how fast time flew by since he left for the capital. The blonde wastes no time and pulls him into a tight hug, catching up on lost time, but quickly notices his exhausted face and asks if something went wrong. This cutie is Florcerio, the only daughter of the orphanage director where the boy was raised and his closest childhood friend, having spent their entire lives together until she became a respected mage of the kingdom, always giving our hero the biggest moral support through all his tough times. Now sitting in a tavern, the young woman listens closely to the boy venting about trying to speak with the king, learning that the prince had him barred from entering the castle and that he only came to say goodbye, looking at the girl before having to leave the country for good. The blonde listens calmly to it all and out of nowhere announces she's traveling with him, making our protagonist's brain short-circuit on the spot, trying to process her answer. When he asks why, she straight up replies that she loves him with all her heart, turning the kid red as a tomato while she reaffirms that she's not letting him leave alone. Riku freezes up, holding his head, saying he can't wrap his mind around this confession, but the mage explains with a gorgeous smile that she loves him as family and as a man, admiring his tireless effort, holding the young man's hand with deep warmth and tenderness, reminding him that he used to donate his whole salary to the orphanage, but now he doesn't need to worry about that. She shares that the local adventurer guild invited her dad to take over as guild master, and reveals that the director is finally getting remarried, leaving the boy completely jaw-dropped, explaining it's been years since losing her mom and her dad finally overcame his shyness, praising the new stepmom as a super hardworking and trustworthy woman to manage everything. Thanks to this union and the money sent by Riku, the orphanage got out of poverty and no longer needs support, lifting a massive weight off our protagonist's shoulders. While the blonde emphasizes that he worked way too hard and now has every right to live however he wants, she squeezes his hand warmly, asking at a playful tone if he hates her company, getting a direct and sincere answer from the young man saying he loves her too, making the girl celebrate, saying she wants to stay by his side for the rest of her life, revealing that as soon as the orphanage's situation improved, all she thought about was confessing to him. The girl even adds that a country which banishes someone so dedicated doesn't deserve them at all, making Riku flash a relieved smile, agreeing with her words, and officially inviting her to join him on this new journey across the world. With a wonderful smile, the young woman accepts instantly and the two decide to head abroad together. Meanwhile, back in the capital of Bigatanika Kingdom, the king is throwing a massive fit on his throne, roaring at the top of his lungs to bring his idiot son into the hall immediately, sending the guard who blocked Riku's entry straight to hard labor in the mines as punishment. When his advisor asks if this isn't an overreaction, the king almost sends him to the mines too, explaining that the banished young mage is nothing less than a supreme genius, a once-in-a-thousand-years talent, and asks if the advisor knows about the capital's Great Barrier, that colossal dome that repels monsters and shields the entire city from outside threats. The king reveals that Riku built that defense all on his own and reminds him of the monster pack that vanished out of nowhere, confirming that the slaughter of that winged dragon swarm was also the boy's barrier work, revealing that the kid has mastered hidden secret arts within his protection magic, an insane power that surpasses ordinary human understanding and leaves the advisor speechless. The monarch explains he's close friends with the academy director, who was already raving about our boy's talent, hoping that the crown prince realized what a colossal mistake he made by kicking the kid out, figuring the hero's party must already be struggling without Riku's invisible protection, firmly believing his son returned full of regret to apologize to the throne. Except the prince struts into the hall, all smug, proudly announcing he successfully banished Riku, calling the kingdom's greatest prodigy a criminal who wasted tax money, making the king explode in rage, swearing that his own son is a complete jackass, leaving the hero utterly clueless about that furious scolding, while the ruler rants, asking if he has any clue what unbelievable stupidity he just committed, with the blonde shocked since he thought kicking the kid out was a master move, while the king screams that he unleashed the strongest mage in the world and the fallout will shake the entire continent. Back to our protagonist. He walks under the moonlight and says they need to say goodbye to Mr. Daryan, asking hesitantly if the girl is sure about leaving her post as a royal mage for him, but gets cut off by a loving hug from the blonde, who states with conviction that she decided to stand by him no matter what, making the young man thank his companion from the bottom of his heart for her loyalty. The young woman then pulls the boy along, telling him to man up and talk to her father, as both of them approach the orphanage building in the dead of night. Finding the director in the kitchen of the home, the man turns around surprised upon hearing his daughter's voice, flashing a wide grin as he recognizes Riku and asking if the young man is doing well, when the blonde drops the bomb, without hesitation, that she's getting married to our protagonist. The boy almost chokes from embarrassment at the direct reveal, but the father-in-law approves the marriage right away, leaving the young man stunned by how easily he gave his blessing. Daryan explains that he knows the boy's strength and spotless character, knowing he takes care of Fleur better than anyone, making the girl put on a proud and triumphant smile, while the dad mentions he already knew everything because his daughter wouldn't stop asking about Riku all day long, catching a kick straight to the shin from the embarrassed girl, who tells the old man to shut his mouth and stop talking nonsense. Rubbing his leg, the man asks where the new couple plans on living from now on, making Riku scratch his head and confess that he was just banished from the kingdom by the crown prince, with his daughter fuming as she explains that the spoiled noble called our boy useless, making Daryan sigh as he remembers that he used to teach that prince combat back in the day. The man calmly reveals that he was an S-rank adventurer back then, leaving the young man shocked that he kept such a massive detail hidden for all these years, while the veteran explains he was hired by royal request but got fired quickly for not kissing the prince's butt, confirming that the hero was always a total idiot since he was a kid. Setting the stories aside, the director states that he only wants to see his daughter's happiness above all else, and walks over to the bedroom wardrobe, pulling out a heavy pouch kept strictly under lock and key, handing over the money as an official wedding gift to help on their journey. The boy tries to turn it down out of embarrassment, but Darian insists, saying this was savings kept for the girl's wedding, assuring them that they don't need to send another dime because he and his new wife will manage the orphanage, revealing that his wife is out of town on a quest since she's an active S-rank adventurer. The veteran warns that vampires and dark creatures are showing up frequently in the area, warning about the dangerous rumor that the Queen of the Night has risen from the dead, making our protagonist recall the legend of the vampire ruler who was so powerful she could only be sealed in ancient times, reflecting seriously on the genuine danger of that monster, since in the past not even the hero class could wipe out that creature for good. Darian asks both of them to be very careful on the road due to the rise of the undead, but young Fleur thumps her chest with full confidence, saying nothing bad will happen, reminding him that she's traveling alongside the greatest barrier master of all, drawing a warm smile from our boy. Riku holds his beloved's hand, promising himself that he won't let a single scratch touch her, determined to crush any Queen of the Night or obstacle in their path with his own powers. The father-in-law points out that vampires are immortal but fully trusts the boy's extraordinary skills, listening to the young man promise that when it comes to protection he doesn't lose to anyone, making the man smile in satisfaction and asking him to take good care of his daughter. The blonde then shows up with a massive mountain of luggage and trunks for the trip, leaving both men speechless, seeing how much unnecessary junk she packed for the road. But the girl sweetly asks Riku to solve the problem using his entrapment magic, making our protagonist cast support for number 5, activating the storage technique that makes all the luggage disappear into a dimensional barrier in a snap. The father-in-law praises the boy's crazy power, who says this isn't even the tip of the iceberg, explaining that he has devastating secret arts for every single one of his barrier variations, making the young woman swell with pride as she states no vampire in the world could match our hero. When the time comes to say goodbye, Riku gets ready to head out, receiving an emotional and loving look from his former guardian, bowing in deep gratitude for all the years of care at the orphanage. Out on the road under the moonlight, the two start discussing which way to go, and Fleur suggests heading toward the neighboring Madoka's empire, a meritocratic nation where even commoners can become nobles. But right as the young man agrees with the idea, he senses an evil presence approaching through the darkness. In a serious tone, our protagonist tells the girl to get inside the protective barrier immediately, locking his eyes onto the night sky without wasting a single second, locking the mage inside an impenetrable containment cube while she asks what happened, shouting that the enemy just arrived, attacking with full force from above the trees. A violent explosion rocks the ground, kicking up dust and debris against the shields, revealing a sinister laugh echoing to the shadows of the clearing, from where a stunning woman with silver hair, red eyes, and a crimson dress emerges, arrogantly introducing herself as the legendary Queen of the Night, the matriarch of vampires. The monster says she caught a tasty scent and came to have a midnight snack on the two humans. But before she even finishes speaking, Riku already traps the vampire in an aerial barrier and triggers attack form number 1, unleashing the star projectile spell that peppers the creature with a relentless barrage of light. The ruler crashes, stunned to the ground, unable to understand how a physical blow hurt her undead body, while our protagonist glares at the furious beast, telling her never to underestimate a true barrier master, raising his hand and saying the iron wall of the court will be her worst nightmare. The vampire ruler flashes a sadistic grin, showing off her sharp fangs, while Riku tells Fleur to wait quietly inside the barrier because nobody is laying a finger on her, with the blonde blushing and cheering with all her heart for her lover's victory, leaving the young man ready to fight on the front lines with a steady gaze. The monster scoffs, saying his magic is nothing more than cheap party tricks, floating in the air as she activates her life drain technique that begins to wither the forest, promising to suck out every single drop of life from everything around her. But upon landing on the ground, she gets spooked, seeing the boy untouched inside the magic dome. The vampire screams in frustration, unable to understand how he's still standing right in front of her, swearing that attack would drain the life of an ancient dragon. But our protagonist replies he simply used his barrier, leaving the creature hysterical, calling that outcome an impossible absurdity. She rants, saying barriers are only supposed to repel simple physical impacts, but the young man calmly counters, explaining that his shield nullifies absolutely any attack meant to harm, making the ruler tremble in rage, having never heard of such an overpowered defense. Riku looks into his enemy's eyes, telling her to memorize this lesson before she dies, forming the magic seal with the tips of his fingers, summoning multiple barrier projectiles all around his body, making the monster break into a cold sweat as she realizes the danger. The young man unleashes the volley of projectiles with everything, forcing the creature to spread her wings and take flight, catching our protagonist's attention with that transformation, while she brags from above saying she commands the art of crimson blood, focusing a sphere of energy to crush the human, releasing the blood thread technique that rains down like a torrent of sharp spikes. But the kid activates his containment instantly and takes the monstrous impact without backing down an inch, hearing the vampires scream at him to accept death and get impaled, only for our mage to whisper defensive formula number 3, triggering the burst technique, which makes the shield glow intensely, repelling the blood threads back at twice the speed toward the caster herself, hitting the creature dead on and ripping out a deafening shriek of agony. The monster hits the dirt, battered and bruised, unable to believe her own attack was redirected, screaming how he managed to deflect spears capable of piercing even a demon god's body, with Riku calmly explaining that he merely reflected the attack with his barrier, revealing that he altered the structure's density to make it bouncy like rubber. The ruler is left stunned by such a genius application of a magical shield, while our protagonist watches the enemy's wounds regenerate in seconds due to her immortality, throwing out a nice taunt, asking if she's already running out of breath in battle, noting that the dreaded queen is having a ridiculously hard time against a simple human, and when the monster demands to know who he is, the boy says he's just a defective barrier mage, making the villainess scream in fury, telling him to stop lying. Overcome with a rage, the vampire screams that she carries ancient noble blood and won't lose to a mortal, while Riku's blue eyes stay focused and completely expressionless, watching his opponent activate her blood doping technique, sending her strength and speed through the roof, darting forward as a red blur and appearing right in his face in the blink of an eye, laughing in his face saying that at point-blank range it's impossible to raise a barrier, grabbing our protagonist from behind in a suffocating hold to bite into his neck. But the boy doesn't even flinch with worry at the point-blank ambush, as the monster triggers her secret art of lethal drain with blood tendrils wrapping around his body, laughing hysterically as she says she will drain the boy's life until he turns to dust in seconds, until Riku opens his mouth cool as a cucumber, letting her know he's still alive and kicking. The vampire's eyes nearly pop out of her head at that calm voice, asking in a panic how he managed to cast a defense with zero space between their bodies, listening to the mage tell her to look very closely at the surface of his skin, revealing defensive formula number 5 that coats a microscopic barrier armor directly over his body, leaving the creature terrified, wondering if that monster is even a real human being. Seeing that she doesn't stand a chance, the villainess opens her wings to beat a retreat, shouting that she'll let him live for today, but will come back to kill him next time, only for a blue light to flash above, blocking her escape route, making the monster slam face first into a glowing aerial cage, as Riku smirks, activating auxiliary formula number 6, the bird cage prison. The magic cage shines brightly in the night sky, trapping the sovereign with no way out, as our protagonist coldly warns that there won't be a next time because he's sealing her right here, noting that since she's an immortal being she wouldn't die anyway, reaching his hand out to erase that monster's existence from the face of the earth once and for all. The vampire panics upon realizing the young man descends from the barrier masters who sealed her in the past, understanding that noble bloodline carries the only effective counter against immortal creatures, falling into despair seeing her ultimate natural predator standing right before her eyes, screaming that she just broke free and refuses to go back into eternal imprisonment. Riku doesn't show a shred of mercy and triggers the secret art of evil spirit sealing, transforming the vampire queen's body into a silver cross pendant that drops gently onto the forest floor. Young Claire breathes a sigh of relief with a hand on her chest after witnessing that insane battle, running over excitedly to praise her fiancé for sealing a legendary vampire with such ease, making the young man return the gesture with a sweet and protective look, fondly recalling a past memory where his former master revealed that Claire is a child of heaven, explaining to little Riku that the girl is a special and sacred existence, and that because of this blessing many monsters and dark creatures would hunt her power down in the future, charging the boy with the mission to protect his companion against any threat that arises. And when the kid asked if his master couldn't stay with them forever, she said it was impossible, taking a drag from her cigarette while explaining she had her own duties to fulfill around the world, ordering the young man to protect Claire tooth and nail until his very last breath, promising himself that he will keep that vow even if it cost him his life. Under the full moon's glow, Claire gushes with love, praising Riku's ridiculous strength, saying she doesn't give a damn about the idiot prince or the exile, because the world will soon recognize his worth, promising to always stay by the boy's side to cherish the wonderful power he holds, making the young man thank her with a calm and affectionate gaze. Our protagonist then excuses himself to check the forest perimeter, saying he needs to verify something, and as soon as the girl gives him the okay, he darts through the bushes in the blink of an eye, leaving the young woman waiting peacefully in the clearing. The young man walks over to where the silver cross fell onto the ground, reaching down to pick up the monster's sealed pendant, and calls out to the vampire asking if she can hear his voice from inside, hearing a whiny grumble coming straight from the metal object. The creature throws a hysterical tantrum inside the artifact, screaming that she lost to a mere human, whining in rage over being humiliated while the boy tells her to calm down, concentrating a touch of mana into the palm of his glove, making the glowing barrier symbol shine brightly, releasing a magical smoke that spreads through the trees, from which a little vampire girl with pigtails and a maid dress pops out, wearing the silver cross hanging right in the middle of her chest, waking up startled, unable to understand how she got out of her prison, with our protagonist explaining that he only loosened the seal to release a fraction of her physical body, leaving the little monster stunned to see that 100% of her original power is still locked in the cross. Riku states in a firm voice that he only brought her out to ask questions and demands honest answers, but the brat turns up her nose, saying with disdain that she'd never speak to a human, catching a brutal containment shock on the spot that makes the girl scream in pain, while the young man jabs the cross into the dirt, warning that he can lock her back up whenever he wants, threatening to toss the pendant to the bottom of the ocean to keep her confined for all eternity. The artifact shakes in panic, with the vampire begging to come out and swearing to obey everything without complaining, making our hero snap his fingers to free her once again, with the servant dropping to the ground panting and complaining about the humiliation of taking orders from a mortal, getting spooked again as the containment spell readies in that very instant. On her knees, she asks what he wants to know, and the young man demands her true name to hold power over her existence, making the monster give in and shout that her name is Carmilla Vlad Tepes, listening to our protagonist introduce himself casually while she complains about being questioned like a kid. But the young man mocks her actual age and asks about the noble bloodline she mentioned during their fight. The girl reveals that she refers to the pureblood vampire clan, confirming there are other members just like her, closing her eyes with a smug look, until Riku asks if she's just a weak scrub among them, making the little monster flip out, calling him a freak, yelling that nobody in the world seals a vampire alone without a massive multi-hour ritual and a whole squad, with the boy calmly answering that he's just an ordinary human and that she's extremely rude, rubbing in her face that she was simply too weak and making the vampire throw a fit of rage. The young man questions the whereabouts of the other vampires and learns that their ancient seals are about to break, getting curious to understand why her prison shattered before the others, with Carmilla explaining that she drank the blood of a barrier master in the past and absorbed the knowledge to escape, admitting with shame that she knows how to cast barriers but doesn't come close to his level of power. Riku asks if she knows the names and techniques of each sealed comrade, getting confirmation from the brat before she freezes up, seeing our protagonist's calculating look, nervously asking what's going on inside that mage's head, until the boy points his finger straight at her, ordering her to become his official servant. The monster gets outraged at having to become a slave, but he offers a bit of freedom in exchange for information. And when the proud girl tries to rebel, saying she's royalty, the young man triggers the containment, locking the girl back into the silver pendant, warning that this isn't a polite request but an absolute decision. The vampire curses him out, calling him a heartless demon, getting a mocking reply that it sounds like a compliment from her, asking from inside why on earth he even needs a monster's help, with the young man explaining he will inevitably run into the other vampires and wants to be prepared in advance. And when she threatens to refuse, betraying her kin, he threatens to seal her forever, making the creature apologize instantly. Riku orders complete silence so she doesn't scare Flare, and Carmilla agrees to talk only through telepathy, as he runs back to his beloved, who asks with a smile if everything is okay over there, getting a gentle head pat from our protagonist, who reassures her that the path is clear, leaving the blonde relieved, jumping onto his neck with a tight and passionate hug. But upon sensing the girl's scent, the cross shivers in shock at the divine presence, recognizing Claire's sacred essence and realizing who that maiden truly belongs to. While Riku mentions they've wasted enough time and raises his hand to cast another secret barrier technique, activating the creation of all things, which materializes a luxury carriage complete with horse made of pure energy, sending the servant in the pendant into a mental panic while the young man tells her to stop making a scene, listening to the monster freak out, saying it's impossible to make a vehicle out of shields, while our boy explains he molded magic atoms, detailing that he shrank his barriers down to the smallest particle in the universe to assemble any object he wants with ease, making the vampire scream in despair, calling our hero crazy and completely insane. And so, with a loud-mouthed servant in his pocket, the couple's grand journey finally begins down the road, without any clue of the massive dangers and trials waiting for them along the way. Our couple's trip continues smoothly down the road with the magic carriage rolling gently, without needing any driver since Riku steers everything just by controlling the barrier, while the young man watches his beloved with a small smirk asking if she really liked that critter that much. Watching Flora give sweet pets to the black cat lying on her lap, with the feline sporting a grumpy look like she's putting up with it against her will. The truth is that this kitty is the queen of the night herself, the dreaded Carmilla Vlad Tepes, who wouldn't stop whining that she hated being locked in the dark cross forever, forcing our hero to mold this cat body out of a barrier and use the cross as a collar, telling his fiancée he found the stray kitten in the forest after that battle, making the blonde adopt the little creature on the spot to be part of their new family. Riku bites his lip, dying of jealousy watching the vampire get all that affection, catching a smug and teasing glare from the animal's glowing red eyes, until Carmilla warns him through telepathy to stop being jealous because trouble is brewing outside. The young man stops the carriage saying he's going to check the commotion, and the girl decides to come along, finding dozens of armored soldiers collapsed and groaning in agony along the roadside, with wounded warriors whimpering nonstop propped against tree trunks, leaving young Fleur shocked by the sheer number of victims scattered along the road, while the guards beg desperately for any kind of healing potion, shouting to bring all available medicine bottles from the camp. Our protagonist observes the tragedy with a heavy and thoughtful expression, apologizing to his partner because the rescue here will take quite some time, hearing the blonde reply with determination that she insists on helping too, making the young man focus his attention toward the most critically injured. He approaches a dark-haired warrior sitting on the ground and asks if she's okay, introducing himself as a simple traveler who knows a bit of healing magic, making the soldier thank him in relief and point toward her dying comrades. But Riku widens his eyes, noticing the woman's own critical condition, realizing with shock that her left arm has been completely severed and bleeds non-stop. The captain reveals with a grim look that this was the work of an elite creature, explaining her squad was hunting a vicious beast when they walked into a terrible ambush, making the kitten in Flair's arms shiver in fear and growl softly, while the blonde tries to soothe the pet, unaware that Carmilla recognized who those soldiers are. Riku decides to treat the woman's wound first, and when she says hopelessly that there's no fixing a severed arm, he fires back saying he definitely can, leaving the woman stunned as he raises 2 fingers to activate auxiliary formula number 2, releasing the healing spell that envelops the injury with a sparkling blue light. The severed limb regenerates completely in the blink of an eye, leaving the captain ecstatic, celebrating that miracle which will allow her to return to hunting bloodthirsty prey, while Carmilla sweats nervously on Fleur's lap, knowing full well that vampires are the targets. The woman jumps for joy, shouting to the entire platoon that this young man is a legendary healer, with our protagonist awkwardly trying to explain that he's not a healer at all. But the warrior begs him to save her comrades, and the boy lets out a resigned sigh. Riku then activates his entrapment technique and expands the barrier into a massive dome over the forest, calling out the mass healing chant to cover all the soldiers at once, sending a pouring shower of glowing particles to wash over every warrior's body, closing all deep wounds and restoring the troops' vigor in an instant, making the soldiers rise to their feet full of energy, unable to believe what just happened, raising their arms to the heavens and praising the boy as if he were a god descended upon earth. Our hero waves his hands frantically, saying he's neither god nor healer but just a barrier master, leaving the squad leader speechless, unable to understand how a shield can heal wounds. Hearing our boy explain that his barrier has a high concentration of oxygen and pure light mana, supercharging cellular regeneration inside the dome, while the woman pretends to understand everything, thanking the barrier master deeply before he asks what beasts they were pursuing. The captain turns serious, warning that the region is extremely dangerous because it harbors a bloodthirsty vampire, revealing that the monster in question is the legendary Queen of the Night, leaving Riku with a deadpan look, unable to believe the coincidence, remembering the feared ruler he just took down minutes ago. While the kitty on Floor's lap hisses nervously, terrified of having her cover blown, the young man rests his hand on his chin, asking where this dangerous monster is located, ignoring Camilla's mental complaints and calmly announcing that he already sealed the Queen of the Night, making the leader widen her eyes, shouting in complete shock, asking if that's actually true, with the boy confirming and telling her to relax, prompting the woman to ask for her savior's name. Hearing him proudly introduce himself as Riku Guardman, the warrior thumps her chest, introducing herself as Siraj, commander of the Fang Hunters, leaving our protagonist curious about the group's name, while Carmilla confirms via telepathy that this guild specializes in exterminating vampires, making the boy admit that he had never heard of this organization before. But out of nowhere, Commander Siraj falls to her knees begging Riku to join the Fang Hunters, offering her very own captain rank on the spot for him to accept the invitation and save the world. But the young man turns it down flat, with a subtle smile saying saving the world is beyond his reach, looking warmly at Flare and stating he only wants to protect the humble happiness right in front of him. The captain won't take no for an answer and throws herself around his waist in desperation, tugging at our boy's clothes and screaming they need someone strong to defeat the vampires together, making Riku yell back that he won't join no matter what, while their argument echoes through the whole forest. Back inside the carriage, the vampire asks via telepathy what Riku plans to do with his life now. Hearing the young man say he's becoming an adventurer and asking why he turned down the Hunter Guild, while Flare sleeps soundly beside them, and Carmilla notes an organization would offer steady pay and housing, the young man reveals the Fang Hunters don't pay a single gold coin for their work, making the kitty sweat nervously, finding that cult super shady for working for free, explaining they are just a bunch of zealots obsessed with saving the world. Riku vents saying he needs real money to support his married life with Fleur, gloomily remembering he's considered a defective mage who'd struggled to find normal work, making the servant realize that in the Adventurer Guild, pure skill is what matters without class prejudice. When she asks if he was ever an adventurer before, the boy says he went straight from the academy to the palace, leaving the monster worried about the boy's complete lack of common sense regarding everyday life, earning a death threat from our protagonist with a barrier glowing in her face. The young man assures her he trained hard with his old master and knows enough combat basics to get by, explaining she was the one who taught him all the fundamentals and barrier combat techniques, until a massive roar tears through the night and shakes the entire carriage. The young man peeks through the vehicle's tarp to check the source of the noise, spotting a massive winged dragon tearing across the dark sky, making Carmilla panic via telepathy, asking how he can stay so calm facing a high-level monster. Hearing our protagonist reply with a smirk that he beat plenty of those during training with his master, raising his open hand to cast a colossal geometric barrier up above, excitedly calculating that the reptile's corpse must fetch a fortune on the market. Riku activates entrapment, trapping just the monster's head inside a magic cube, sending the dragon crashing down like a stone straight into the forest floor. The young man steps out pleased with himself while the kitty asks in shock what he did to the beast. Hearing the boy reply that he simply suffocated the beast with his barrier, leaving the servant dumbfounded, explaining he wrapped the shield around its head and removed all air inside to asphyxiate the target, stating as naturally as breathing that whoever creates the barrier controls everything inside it, making the vampire throw a tantrum, screaming that his magic is completely broken and absurd. Our protagonist walks to the monster saying he never met another barrier user to know the baseline, making Carmilla grumble under her breath that the kid is a living anomaly and doesn't even realize it, asking why on earth he bothered suffocating it instead of blowing it up with magic stars. Hearing the young man explain that destructive magic would ruin the scales and lower its value at the guild, the servant gulps nervously at such calculated business logic, while Riku reaches out channeling his barrier energy over the carcass, activating the dimensional inventory that sucks the entire dragon into the magic space in a flash, making the cat scream in terror with her jaw dropped, unable to comprehend the giant beast vanishing. Our protagonist patiently explains that he stored the prey inside a dimensional barrier, detailing that the inside of a shield acts as a pocket space isolated from our own reality, leaving the little monster staring blankly, unable to keep up with the theory, while he teaches her that placing items inside this magic rift is just the basic inventory function. The vampire calls the boy a boundless freak, but he fires back calling her a defective queen, with the cat asking if his power is in some grotesque glitch in the world system, making the young man mockingly ask if that means he's weak. Hearing the monster yell furiously that he's crazy strong and soloed a pureblood vampire without breaking a sweat, while the boy asks with disdain if vampires are even that dangerous. The feline bristles her fur, saying that in ancient times her clan was feared as the ultimate race, but Riku scruffs the cat, saying ancient history is worthless as she went down that easily, deciding to return to the carriage right as Carmilla's red eyes go wide, sensing a massive approach of hostile presences. A gargantuan swarm of dragons emerges, blotting out the sky with terrifying roars, surrounding our protagonist on all sides with dozens of beasts ready to strike, making the boy's eyes sparkle with joy upon seeing a literal mountain of treasure flying right before him. The kitten sweats bullets, asking if he lost his mind cheering over that kind of danger, watching the young man flash a wicked grin, confirming he's dead serious, bringing his palms together to activate entrapment in its support variation, conjuring the colossal birdcage technique that wraps the entire sky in a glowing dome. locking the full pack of dragons inside the suspended magic bars. But among the trapped beasts, a colossal black dragon emerges, radiating a sinister aura, catching our mage's attention. Sensing that something is very wrong with that specific creature, until the monster unleashes a devastating energy slash that shatters the barrier cage to pieces. Riku is surprised to see his barrier shattered for the first time in his life, remembering that expanding the area thins the density while acknowledging the sheer power of the enemy's strike. The beast drops down roaring with a grotesque body, and Carmilla screams in horror, warning it's a zombie dragon. Hearing the boy ask curiously what that rotting abomination even is, with the servant explaining it's a thrall mutated by the vampire noble bloodline, a creature so corrupted and hardened by decay that nothing can pierce its flesh, making our protagonist lament that rotten meat like that won't fetch a single copper at the guild. The cat suggests sealing the monster, but Riku asks if that undead has vampire immortality. And upon hearing from the servant that only pure vampires are unkillable, the boy smiles, saying no problem, clasping his hands in a prayer pose to channel a forbidden tear spell. Hearing Carmilla warn and panic that the beast's rotten blood and flesh will poison the soil and air, screaming that destroying that freak carelessly will spread toxicity across the whole forest, until our protagonist gives a determined smile, stating he'll disintegrate the monster without leaving a trace behind. Riku presses his hands together as a terrifying energy begins to hum through the air, making the vampire's eyes go wide, unable to grasp what's coming next, shouting at the top of her lungs, asking what madness the boy is planning. Right then, our protagonist activates his barrier transformation, channeling a dark orb wrapped in light to ready his ultimate ability, releasing the forbidden void spell right in the middle of the clearing. Carmilla watches dumbstruck as the black orb rockets at high speed toward the monster, making the zombie dragon let out a terrified roar as it senses impending death, until the spell hits the target dead on, unleashing a blinding flash that engulfs the whole forest, exploding into a colossal pillar of fire that consumes every single atom of the putrid beast, leaving nothing behind. The insane shockwave blasts straight into the kitty, flattening her cheeks against the gale, dragging her tiny paws along the ground against the sheer force of the wind, sending the monster flying through the air while letting out a shrill scream. The night sky fades, giving way to a sunny morning as Riku celebrates that everything went smoothly. Hearing the servant return, fuming, flailing on the ground, demanding to know what demonic power that was. While the young man calmly explains he used his void technique, he explains that matter is made of tiny particles called atoms, teaching that by smashing these barrier structures against neutrons, he generates a fission of immense energy, remarking he heard that this is the exact same principle as a nuclear bomb, though he admits, scratching his chin, that he doesn't fully understand the theory himself. The vampire gets dizzy-eyed without understanding a single thing, thinking that blowing up a dragon swarm like that is purely insane, warning that the kid is way too dangerous for unleashing a cataclysm without even knowing how it works. And when our boy agrees, saying he needs to study more, the cat turns red with anger, throwing a fit, saying she wasn't complaining about his studying but his monstrous strength, utterly baffled by a light of destruction that erased a winged army from the face of the earth. Leaving the argument behind, the carriage finally crosses the border into the beautiful Madoka's empire, with young Flare waking up and explaining they just arrived in the city of Selodius, a bustling trade hub that serves as the gateway to the entire empire, filled with beastmen, elves, and travelers of all races walking the streets. Riku suggests heading straight to the guild, but his fiancée asks to find an inn first, pulling a little note from her pocket with a recommendation for a great spot, showing off proudly that she had already mapped out the best lodging in town. They arrive in front of a cozy 3-story building, heading upstairs to their reserved room down the hall, where the young man turns bright red and shy, asking if she's sure about this. Noticing the room has only a single double bed for the two of them to share, the blonde pouts, pretending to be sad, and asks if he doesn't want to sleep next to her, making our protagonist stammer in panic before she lets out a sweet chuckle, opening her arms with a loving smile and inviting her beloved into bed. Riku gazes, touched at his partner, stepping closer with tenderness under the room's soft light, getting wrapped in a warm hug from the girl, who celebrates how far they've traveled together, with the young man resting his head on her shoulder, remembering everything they faced, listening to the girl praise his hard work and tell him to get a good night of sleep to unwind, letting the young man fall peacefully asleep with an expression of pure bliss. The next morning, our hero heads to the imposing headquarters of the Adventurer Guild, hearing the servant in the cross warn him not to mess up while he reassures her it's just a simple registration, taking steady steps into the building entrance, getting amazed watching the automated doors slide open on their own before his eyes. The hall is packed with armored veterans, and the boy walks up to the reception desk, greeted with a polite smile by the blonde receptionist as he asks to register, receiving the application form and a quill to fill in his personal details. The young man writes down all required information on the official sheet, and reviewing the form, the clerk notices the mage class with only barrier magic, asking with a drop of sweat on her brow if he truly only commands that defensive skill. Hearing our boy's confirmation and informing him he'll need to pass a practical test, the boy finds the requirement strange, but the lady reassures him, saying the Empire only gives easy exams, pulling a glowing crystal orb from under the counter to measure his mana capacity. Hearing the young man ask cautiously if the artifact won't shatter while she assures him it's unbreakable, the receptionist places her palm on the crystal ball to demonstrate the symbol process, making the number 150 light up to indicate her energy level. With Riku surprised since he never saw a gauge like that in the kingdom and learning it's a recent invention, shyly mentioning he has plenty of mana saved up when an annoying voice chimes in mocking him from behind. The kid turns around confused, wondering who this insolent guy is, coming face to face with a short chubby noble in a pink suit, introducing himself as Kamase Diechigoya, laughing in our protagonist's face and asking if he lives under a rock for not knowing his nobility, getting shut down cold by the boy who asks what a noble is doing in the guild, leaving the brat stammering. The rich boy points his finger, mocking a mage who only uses basic barriers and thinks he owns all the mana. Hearing our hero coldly ask to be left alone if he has nothing useful to say, while the chubby guy rants that trying to become an adventurer with a defective power is peak stupidity. Riku locks his gaze and extends a determined hand toward the glass sphere, releasing a titanic burst of pure mana that shatters the unbreakable sphere into thousands of crystal shards, leaving the arrogant noble and the receptionist with their jaws dropped, while our protagonist lets out a little smirk, pretending to be surprised by the device's fragility. The rich noble breaks into a cold sweat, unable to believe what he just saw, screaming uncontrollably, demanding to know what surreal madness just happened right in front of him, while the receptionist enters full panic mode because the unbreakable sphere was destroyed for the first time ever. The servant calmly explains in his mind that the device simply couldn't handle his absurd volume of mana, reminding him that she had warned him beforehand to avoid causing damage. Trying to maintain her composure, the receptionist calls the boy over for the next test, and he asks how many are left. Hearing the staff member hold up two fingers, explaining that target practice and simulated combat still remain, making the young man sigh in resignation at having to face two more stages. The group walks out to the guild's outdoor training yard, where the girl positions the applicants in front of a circular target set at a fair distance, explaining that the board has a built-in magic mechanism to measure the impact of long-range attacks, guaranteeing a pass for anyone who manages to hit the required minimum score. Riku understands that the test evaluates any ranged strike, and the girl confirms that even arrows are allowed, prompting the boy to ask cautiously what the maximum force limit on that target is. Hearing the receptionist smile and assure him the structure has reinforcement magic and will never break, though she asks him to hold back a bit while Kamasi butts in, mocking the kid's face, scoffing at a defective mage who only uses barriers and asking how he plans to fire anything from there, swearing our protagonist will fail miserably and deciding to give a practical demonstration of how it's done. Hearing our hero decline the help and mockingly ask if the noble is also becoming an adventurer, making the chubby guy blow his top, telling the kid to shut his mouth and mind his own business. The receptionist lets out a long, tired sigh from all that bickering, while Riku watches the whole scene with complete tranquility in his eyes. The noble puffs out his chest, shouting for everyone to witness his hellfire, planting his hands on the ground to open a magic circle, summoning the spirit of flames, gathering a blazing spear of fire in the palm of his hand with a dramatic pose, pulling off an exaggerated acrobatic jump to build momentum in the air, hurling a blazing fireball at maximum speed straight into the target, blasting the area with a deafening roar of flames and smoke. The staff member is genuinely impressed by the power shown by the spoiled brat, celebrating as the display shows 132 points and announcing he cleared the average with ease, leaving Kamase grinning from ear to ear and bragging about his true strength in front of our protagonist. The receptionist announces that now it's Riku's turn to show what he's capable of, and the boy takes slow steps until positioning himself in the center of the yard, hearing Carmilla warn via telepathy that he needs to take it easy so he doesn't cause another scene, with the boy agreeing and promising he won't use the void technique so he doesn't erase the whole blah. He simply points his index finger, creating a tiny star projectile out of a barrier, firing off a sonic blast so violent that it shatters the solid stone wall at the back of the yard, blasting a clean crater right through the center of the target and piercing the entire building, leaving the receptionist and the noble frozen with their jaws wide open, unable to utter a single word. letting out a synchronized, hysterical scream of shock at the sight of that massive hole. Kamase freaks out, shouting that chantless casting is an extremely advanced technique and asks how he did that. Hearing our protagonist answer with total composure while Carmilla is stunned by her master's insane mastery. The clerk stammers that chantless shots are usually weaker, yet this one completely pulverized the gauge, staring at the pierced target, unable to understand where such destructive power came from, while Riku peeks through the gaping wall hole, scratching his head and complaining that he tried to go easy. The brat screams in fury, claiming that was a lie and complete nonsense, loudly demanding to know how on earth anyone can attack using only barrier magic. And when our hero asks what would make him believe it, the noble challenges the boy to an immediate duel. Kamase points out that the third stage is a practical combat test against a guild adventurer and demands to personally fight that alleged defective product to evaluate his skills, making the receptionist ask for our protagonist's consent while worried about the fight. Riku accepts without hesitation, saying he wants to wrap this up quickly so he doesn't waste more time. Hearing the noble swear he would never lose a magic showdown as both take their distance in the arena, until the receptionist authorizes the official start of the match. The chubby guy opens a magic circle on the ground, summoning the power of the fire spirit once more, while our mage crosses his arms calmly and simply raises two glowing fingers, activating his entrapment barrier technique right in front of his rival. The brat mocks, calling the defense pathetic and swearing his magic will obliterate the shield. But the boy counters with a slight grin, warning that he won't even need to block any hit, infuriating the noble right before he launches his massive fireball, hurling the blaze bloodthirstily to incinerate the boy. But upon colliding with the invisible shield, the attack takes a clean curve and heads straight back at the caster, sending Kamase into a panic, shouting for his own fire to stay away, getting engulfed in an explosion that knocks the rich brat flat on the arena floor. Riku smirks, mentioning he used his opponent's own strength against him, explaining he didn't need any effort at all to pay the blow back in kind. The noble sits there charred and dizzy with smoke rising from his head, completely clueless. Hearing our protagonist hold out his hand, telling him to look carefully around his own body, revealing he trapped him in a prismatic barrier with a reflection technique that bounces back any spell, leaving the rich kid stammering, unable to believe it's possible to reflect magic like that. Hearing the boy firmly state with authority that anything is possible for those who master the art of barriers, Kamase flops onto his back on the ground, thoroughly defeated, admitting this is totally surreal, while the receptionist claps in ecstasy, declaring our hero passed with flying colors, prompting Riku to thank her politely and ask if the noble managed to pass the stage as well. Hearing the brat sprawled on the ground shout in panic that he passed the exam too, the young man praises his rival, saying he really has pretty potent magic for a beginner, leaving Carmilla inside the cross, confused, wondering if our boy is a good person at heart or a sadistic monster. While the staff clerk flashes a smile, extending an official welcome to the Adventurer Guild, respectfully greeting Mr. Riku Guardman as the institution's newest and most powerful member, making our boy smile proudly, ready to kick off his new life in the Madokus Empire. The receptionist gives an official welcome to Riku at the guild, and the boy thanks her rather bashfully, with the young woman introducing herself, saying her name is Ronka. Our protagonist takes the opportunity to ask if the place buys monster materials from hunted beasts, hearing the girl confirm and suggest appraising the parts at the indoor counter. But the kid immediately warns that it won't be possible to do the appraisal inside, scratching his head awkwardly and saying the carcass definitely won't fit in the reception lobby. The receptionist wears a puzzled expression, not understanding the size of the beast, until the boy reaches out his open hand, causing a magical light to pulse from his palm, materializing the colossal body of a green dragon right in the middle of the training yard. The receptionist's jaw hits the floor, shouting in shock, wanting to know where he pulled that giant monster from, while Riku finds her surprise strange, noting that spatial magic and magic bags are pretty common. Hearing the girl stammer that he was only supposed to use barriers, and our boy assuring her anything is possible with effort, leaving the clerk lost in thought, thinking she couldn't replicate that in a million years, letting out a nervous little chuckle, completely at a loss for words, while the boy realizes Miss Ranka has simply given up on trying to understand his logic. Several adventurers gather around, whispering in awe at the flawless condition of the prey, asking how he managed to take down a reptile of that size without leaving a single slash mark. Hearing our hero answer that he merely suffocated the creature, leaving the receptionist intrigued, until the kid explains he choked the monster using a barrier, leaving the entire courtyard astonished. The veterans start muttering among themselves, saying that's impossible for a basic tear spell, and the young man innocently details that he enclosed the beast's head and removed all oxygen inside, tying the receptionist's brain into knots with endless magical questions. making our protagonist sweat nervously, afraid he might have overcomplicated the explanation. The girl confesses that this concept is way too advanced for her, and Riku apologizes, reiterating that he didn't obtain the carcass through any shady methods. Receiving a warm wink from Rinka saying she fully trusts the young man's terrifying power, leaving the boy relieved that his word is taken seriously. The receptionist inspects the flawless body of the green dragon with a worried look, and regretfully informs him that the Salodia's guild won't be able to buy its carcass, explaining that such a rare and pristine piece is worth an astronomical fortune that the branch simply doesn't have on hand, making our protagonist clutch his head in disbelief at such beginner's bad luck. The receptionist bows, apologizing profusely, but the boy understands the local guild's financial limitations, deciding that the best way to earn quick cash is to take a regular quest from the board, asking if there's any simple gathering request and finding a task to collect 1 kilogram of herbs. Accepting the job right on the spot with great excitement, Ronka places the official quest slip on the counter, noting that all he has to do is turn in the harvested medicinal plants to receive the promised coin reward, sending the young man down the entrance steps, thrilled to start his very first day of work. But a mocking laugh echoes on the sidewalk, ridiculing someone who's going to pick tiny weeds, running right into Kamasi accompanied by 2 female warriors, and surprised to see the noble recovered so fast. Hearing the rich boy brag, saying he's going monster hunting in the forest unlike a defective weakling, telling the kid to stay clear of the forest's danger so he doesn't embarrass himself. Getting hit with a counter from Riku, who asks if the chubby noble is afraid of being outshined, turning him bright red, making the spoiled brat huff in anger and march off with his companions. The vampire servant remarks via telepathy that the guy must be a total idiot for continuing to underestimate him, with our protagonist replying that people only see what they want to see, as he calmly continues on his way, determined to gather his medicinal herbs in the forest without wasting any time. Standing at the city exit, the boy extends his arm, activating his entrapment spell, rocketing through the air at sonic speed like a guided missile across the plains, making Carmilla shriek inside the cross in pure panic, not understanding what madness was unfolding. Riku lands smoothly at the forest entrance, announcing that they've reached their destination, wearing a serene and calm expression on his face, while the vampire flips out in fury from inside, asking what's wrong with his head, demanding to know how a barrier mage can fly through the skies so casually, screaming hysterically that she can't stomach this insanity, flailing with her jaw hanging wide open, completely baffled, until the boy calmly explains that the principle behind flying is super simple. He picks up a small stone from the grass to demonstrate the technique in practice, explaining that a barrier is cast over fixed coordinates in empty space, showing that by placing the stone inside a suspended dome, it floats along with the structure, and by moving the barrier through the air, the object inside travels at high speed in the same direction, meaning you just need to wrap your own body in the shield to fly freely, leaving the servant stunned by the sheer bizarre logic. The young man readies for the harvest, and Carmilla mockingly asks if he even knows how to identify the right herbs. Hearing our protagonist say he doesn't need to know, as he conjures a monumental barrier over a massive area of the forest, calmly clenching his fists to trigger the spell's command, causing the colossal dome to slowly contract, pushing trees and dirt outward, until only a tiny glowing cube remains in the palm of the young man's hand, containing exclusively all the medicinal plants of that region pressed with absolute perfection. The vampire almost chokes seeing that mountain of selected herbs sorted in seconds, hearing the boy explain that he used the barrier as a smart filter to cast out anything that wasn't a medicinal plant, activating the dimensional inventory to stash the entire haul away like magic. The servant stands in shock, admitting that applying barrier magic to filter vegetation is insane genius, with the boy thanking her for the compliment and getting ready to head back to the guild, when desperate cries for help echo from the depths of the forest, catching our hero's attention. Hearing the frantic screams for help, Riku immediately recognizes the voice of that arrogant noble, confirming it's that rich brat Kamasa who's in deep trouble out in the woods. The boy leaps flying through the air, and Carmilla asks if he's really going to save the guy who constantly looked down on him. Hearing our protagonist firmly reply that getting insulted is no excuse to let someone die, making the vampire give a wry smile, calling the kid a total weirdo, praising her master's good heart as the boy spots the victims just below. From above, he sees Kamasi running ahead in a panic with a raging wild beast hot on his heels, chasing the adventurers with heavy thudding steps that make the ground shake, until the party's archer trips and falls flat on the path. Watching the cowardly noble celebrate that he'll use the girl's fall to escape on his own, yelling that the only thing that matters is his own survival, until he slams face first into an invisible barrier, taking a nasty hit, Riku traps the brat in a protection cube, telling him to shut up and stay put, making a quick hand gesture to trigger the defense, activating the repulsion barrier that sends the monster tumbling through the air before it can reach the girl. The young man extends a hand to the frightened archer, asking if she's okay, receiving a timid thank you from the girl lying on the grass, telling her with a confident smile that she can thank him later. As a colossal and terrifying shadow emerges from the dust, a deafening roar makes the entire forest vibrate with bloodlust, causing Kamasi to shriek in terror from inside the dome, recognizing the titanic creature as the dreaded Orc King, an extremely dangerous B-rank monster that had no business roaming that low-level forest, sending the noble onto all fours crying for his mommy in complete despair. The beast lunges with glowing red eyes, huffing in rage, swinging down a massive blow with its giant club against our protagonist, who merely smirks, sweeping the air with a thin gleaming mesh of invisible barriers, slicing the Orc King's body into dozens of meat chunks before it even touches the ground, revealing the offensive thread-shaped barrier formula, where the boy stretched the shield down to the thickness of a microscopic wire to sever any matter. Kamase watches with his mouth agape, unable to believe a supposedly defective mage performed such a miracle, meeting our protagonist's serene gaze, who drops a piece of advice reminding him that anyone who gives up before trying will never accomplish anything in life. Back in town, Riku approaches the Adventurer Guild, noticing a noisy commotion coming from the entrance hall, finding merchants and warriors engaged in worried discussions at the counter. He asks Renka what's going on, and the receptionist lights up overjoyed at his arrival, immediately asking if the boy managed to gather the herbs for the quest, confirming that they urgently need a massive quantity of plants. A red-capped merchant named Deshi steps forward in distress, saying he desperately needs medicinal herbs, pointing his finger and requesting no less than 100 kilograms of healing weaves, making the boy place his hand on his chin, pondering the request, while the merchant asks apprehensively if that amount is too difficult to harvest. Hearing our protagonist calmly reply that he has around 500 kilograms stored in his inventory, the receptionist nearly faints from shock at the sheer volume, and the young man scratches his neck, admitting he overdid it, holding out his glowing hand to verify the stock he brought back from the forest, materializing a golden mountain of fresh herbs that fills the entire hall, leaving Deshi in awe. Riku agrees to sell the supplies and empathetically asks if there was some disaster with casualties in the area, hearing the merchant explain that a neighboring town suffered an attack, leaving many people injured, having received an urgent owl message frantically pleading for healing potions. The young man concentrates his barrier energy into the palm of his hand, and asks if it would be better for him to go there in person to treat all the injured, explaining that he uses barrier magic to perform advanced treatments. When the merchant asks about his class, Deshi puts full trust in the young man's words, leaving the relief mission in his hands, leaving our protagonist surprised to have his word accepted right away without any doubts, with the man smiling and stating he has complete confidence in his eye for judging character. The boy looks respectfully at the man's kindness, shaking the merchant's hand to express his deep gratitude for the assistance, asking where the place is located and learning it is the city of Itoi in the Gaeta Niga Kingdom. The young man recalls that this settlement sits right next to Miyoko, his hometown, and when the man points to the high-speed carriage outside, the boy mentions he won't be needing transportation, raising his glowing hand to open magic coordinates in the air, explaining that he passed through Itoi on the way and registered the location in his spatial barrier, warning that he can fly there in seconds, leaving the merchant shocked, thinking it's actual teleportation, releasing a flash of light that transports both of them outside the guild in the blink of an eye. Deshi widens his eyes in utter disbelief, seeing they're already in the center of Itoi City, asking in astonishment who this genius is, and hearing the boy say he's just a defective barrier mage, making the merchant laugh with open arms, praising the insane power and his own sharp eye for talent, while our protagonist gives a small smirk, quickening his pace down the street, focused and determined to reach the wounded who need urgent medical care. Arriving at the outskirts of the town, Riku widens his eyes at the war-torn scene, spotting a violent horde of green monsters breaching the gates with iron clubs, with the beasts roaring and bearing sharp fangs ready to devour everything, making the young man recognize this as a massive assault by feral orcs, attacking the local soldiers who are trying to hold the defensive lines at all costs, while dozens of enemies keep pouring endlessly from the forest. Hearing Deshi trembling terror saying that this is a full-blown monster stampede, the young man watches the herd of hungry creatures marching against the walls, understanding that they intend to overrun the village to prey on defenseless citizens, focusing his energy in the palm of his hand to intervene in the battle right away. He raises a geometric shield around Deshi, asking the merchant to stay still inside. Hearing the man ask anxiously what the boy plans to do alone, with our hero stating with a cold look that he'll settle this problem in an instant. Our protagonist extends his arm, activating the entrapment command, projecting a colossal barrier that encloses the entire battlefield in a dome, leaving the soldiers startled, not understanding where that barrier came from. The boy begins slowly closing his fingers to control the shield's density, while a guard tries to block an orc's heavy strike with his sword. Watching the wall of light pass right through the human harmlessly and shove the beast backward, making the squad shout in surprise as they realize the magic phases through allies, herding all the monsters together in the center like cattle. Deshi thinks the boy is going to attack the trapped monsters all at once, but Riku says no, leaving the merchant wide-eyed, unable to grasp the mage's plan, until our protagonist clenches his fist with full power. The guards watch in shock as the dome begins to rapidly shrink, crushing the entire orc horde inside a tiny cube of pure barrier pressure, reducing the monsters to dust without harming a single human in that efficient slaughter, making the soldiers raise their blades to the sky, celebrating that they've been saved. The merchant weeps with joy, thanking him from the bottom of his heart for saving everyone's lives, receiving a serene smile from the young man who is already preparing for the next step. They head over to the town cathedral, which is currently serving as a field hospital, where Riku's healing spell shines brightly, regenerating the wounds of dozens of patients, with the boy entering the hall alongside Carmilla the cat, seeing the recovered citizens, when desperate weeping pierces the quiet atmosphere of the church. A woman weeps inconsolably, hunched over the lifeless body of her beloved on a stretcher, catching the attention of our hero, who stops in the middle of the hallway to observe her grief, while Deshi approaches, bowing in deep reverence for the rescue of the city, saying everything would have been far worse without his help, and hearing the boy say he just did the job, suggesting they head back to discuss the reward payment when our protagonist interrupts the conversation, warning with a serious look that his work here is not finished yet, staring intently at the young widow who continues weeping over the corpse, and straight up drops that he hasn't yet revived the people who just died, leaving the merchant paralyzed with dread, and Carmilla stammering via telepathy. The vampire asks in astonishment if he mentioned bringing the dead back to life, and the boy calmly confirms, prompting the cat to indignantly ask if he truly believes that is possible in this world, receiving a direct and confident answer that yes it is, making the monster jump into the air, screaming that this is complete delusion, falling flat at her backside onto the church rug in utter clumsiness, hissing furiously that nobody on the face of the earth can revive the dead, while the young man repeats that he can indeed, leaving the servant flailing on the floor. Riku clasps his hands, explaining there are strict conditions for this miracle, releasing an overwhelming holy light that fills every single inch of the cathedral, activating the secret art of divine purification field construction. Carmilla recognizes maximum tier purification that eradicates all impurities from the environment, screaming in shock, seeing the boy created a flawless sacred domain where a deity could dwell, with our protagonist praising her knowledge and the vampire reminding him of her centuries of life. The servant realizes the boy artificially recreated the heavenly realm to call the soul back, watching a beam of light shoot down straight toward the deceased man's chest, making Riku celebrate under his breath as he senses the soul re-entering the physical body, activating the cellular regeneration barrier to mend all fatal damage in the organism. The man lets out a weak groan, beginning to breathe once again, opening his eyes startled, while his wife weeps with emotion and throws herself into a tearful hug, sending the whole church into an uproar, shouting that they witnessed a true resurrection, while Carmilla looks at the young man on the floor, unable to believe a human was capable of such a feat. Riku gets up exhausted, explaining that the ritual only works right after death with an intact body, but the little monster thinks to herself that this power surpassed the realm of humanity a long time ago, until the boy notices a sudden silence and glances behind him. All the wounded soldiers and the merchant Deshi are bowed flat on the ground, paying deep reverence, throwing our hero into full-blown panic at such a bizarre scene, hearing Deshi scream face down on the floor, declaring with absolute certainty that he is a true god, making the young man back away to the cross altar, waving his arms in sheer desperation, while the holy light illuminates the statue in the back of the church, with the boy sweating nervously, swearing up and down that he is no god at all. Walking back through the city streets, the vampire tags along beside our hero, looking at the young man in utter disbelief and demanding explanations, asking what kind of material he is made of to pull off so many insane stunts in a row, pointing out that one minute he fires annihilation beams, and the next he revives the dead like it is nothing. She rants that this is definitely not something a regular human being can do, demanding to know how someone could ever reach such a bizarre level of power. Riku calmly replies that he learned everything from his former master, revealing that she also commanded only one element and was a no magic user, explaining that the world is divided into 6 elemental attributes alongside the null attribute, detailing that his barrier arts belong to that class and his tutor taught him how to adapt its uses. Carmilla suspiciously asks if this mysterious mentor is even stronger than he is. Hearing our protagonist state without hesitation that she is infinitely superior and asking who this woman could be, until the boy reveals that his master's name is Lovemarie. The vampire's eyes nearly pop out of her skull in pure terror upon hearing that name, stammering in fright while the boy curiously asks what is wrong, revealing that Lovemarie is one of the legendary 8 mages who possess overwhelming power in the world, known by all humanity under the feared title of the World Witch, also carrying another dreadful moniker among the creatures of the dark. She reveals the title Guardian of the Underworld, and Riku asks which of the 2 aliases is correct, hearing the servant explain that this was the code name given by the vampire clan itself, because that sorceress watches over the land of the dead to prevent evil souls from returning to the surface, keeping watchful eyes as an eternal sentinel over the shadows, a powerful woman who dwells at the threshold of the deep abyss, sitting imposingly in black robes and puffing her cigarette coldly, recognized as the most feared witch by all monsters and demonic beings across the continent. Carmilla claps her hands, saying she finally gets the secret behind the boy's absurd strength, concluding that someone raised by that legendary monster could only turn out to be a living anomaly, with Riku agreeing and recalling that she beat ancient dragons with her bare hands without using magic, making the young man look back with a nostalgic expression, remembering everything he went through during his grueling training in the past. The little monster pulls out a handkerchief, whining over her bad luck getting captured by the pupil of the Underworld Guardian, while the young man watches the servant's drama with a blank stare, telling the girl to cut the depression and hearing her snap back that he is the last person with the right to say that. Thus the incident in the town of Itoi is completely resolved alongside the merchant. And back at the Solodia's guild, our hero says his goodbyes at the counter when the receptionist asks him to wait, grabbing the young man's hands urgently and leaving the boy totally bewildered, shyly asking what the reason for all the fuss is. Hearing Ranka ask him to wait a bit longer because she is going to call the guildmaster to meet him, explaining that the leader wanted to talk in person, but the boy declines, saying he is exhausted after his first quest, asking to save the chat for another day because he just wants to go to the inn and rest with his fiancée. Riku apologizes to the receptionist with an awkward smile, raising his glowing palms in front of the counter and startling the girl, clapping his hands and promising to talk to the boss next time, firing off a quick teleportation flash that makes the boy vanish from the lobby in the blink of an eye, leaving the receptionist stunned by the lightning-fast escape of her new prodigy. In front of the inn building, the boy lets out a tired sigh, reflecting on the hectic day he had, heading up the hallway stairs accompanied by Carmilla the cat, remembering that he started out taking the practical exam at the Adventurer Guild, went through his first plant-gathering task in the forest, and even had to use his secret techniques to save and resurrect the village of Itoi, feeling exhausted to the bone as he opens the bedroom door. But the moment he steps inside, he is greeted by sweet Flora's radiant smile, who runs over excitedly and throws herself into a tight hug, welcoming her beloved home, brightening the room with a tenderness that melts our protagonist's heart, making all the boy's fatigue vanish into thin air as he returns the embrace. The blonde crouches down to play with the cat, leaving the boy deadpan, thinking the hug ended way too soon, while Carmilla stares at him with a serious and suspicious glare. Watching the couple sit down comfortably on the edge of the bed, the young woman sweetly mentions that the quest took quite a while to finish, hearing the boy say that a lot went down and receiving a gentle compliment for his hard work today. Riku reflects that he met many different people throughout that single day, remembering that unlike the kingdom he was banished from, there are people here who truly recognize his worth, kind-hearted people who genuinely trust and rely on his abilities. Setting aside that rich brat who tried to cause trouble in the morning, he silently admits he was terrified of failing after leaving his homeland. But thanks to everyone's support, he gained the confidence to live as an adventurer and build a stable life beside his beloved, turning his face toward his partner with a deeply affectionate gaze, promising in a gentle voice that he will make her the happiest woman in the world, leaving the girl blushing and speechless before such a heartfelt confession. Overcome with love, the girl cannot resist and pounces, tackling her fiancé onto the bed, softly asking with her face pressed close as she startled him, whispering that he looked so handsome she could not hold back, stating she is already so happy by his side, affectionately asking our protagonist never to overwork himself on her account. Hearing the young man smile softly, saying he understands the message completely, sharing a passionate and warm embrace on top of the mattress. Lying on the corner table, Carmilla the cat watches their flirtatious cuddling, when she spots golden divine particles glowing brightly on the girl's back, rubbing her feline paws against her eyes to make sure she is not losing her mind. Watching the heavenly radiance vanish just as fast as it appeared, left wondering with her wide red eyes if that was merely a trick of her imagination. A few days pass in the city of Solodius until Riku gets summoned to the guild once again, with receptionist Renka sternly announcing that today he will finally meet the guildmaster, making the boy suspicious of that serious expression, wondering if this is related to the monster surge, meeting the blonde receptionist's piercing gaze, asking nervously if it is some complicated task and hoping it is nothing too troublesome. The girl confirms that the leadership wants to hire his services with utmost urgency, lifting a weight off the young man's shoulders, who agrees to head up to the office to hear the proposal. Walking up the stairs and into the room, the supreme leader asks if he is the famous Riku, politely inviting the boy to take a seat on the couch, beginning to recount a mysterious incident that recently emerged in the territory. The bearded man explains that an unknown ruin appeared out of nowhere in the surrounding area, and bizarre monsters started pouring out from those ancient structures. Creatures shaped like humans but actually walking corpses, making our protagonist understand right away that this is a zombie horde. The leader explains that the undead are multiplying en masse and the ruin boss has already been located. Hearing the boy ask if the adventurers already fought this monster and discovering that no attack worked, with the master revealing in a cold sweat that he sent S-rank veterans who returned without leaving a single scratch. Riku deduces on the spot that the enemy possesses immortality and tells Carmilla it might be a relative of hers. Hearing the vampire inside the cross confirm that if the target is invincible, the only solution is sealing just like he did to her, leading the young man to conclude that he is the perfect person for this job. The master praises the boy's flawless record of clearing high-difficulty quests solo, explaining that this is why he is personally making this request as the guild leader, making the young man give a sharp grin confirming he will handle the ruin monsters, getting the man excited to see the boy accept the quest without hesitation, with our protagonist plainly stating that he expects a hefty cash reward for the service, receiving enthusiastic confirmation from the leadership before heading out to the site. The boy dashes at a brisk pace down the road, arriving before an abandoned village blanketed in an eerie mist, explaining to his servant that he came to Suna village to gather intel from the locals about the new dungeon, finding the deathly silence hanging over the empty streets deeply unsettling, while Carmilla warns from inside that she senses an overwhelming presence of death throughout the entire village. Riku wastes no time and activates his echo technique, raising his glowing hand, expanding the colossal barrier wave that sweeps through all the houses across a massive radius, closing the geometric dome to scan the area and detecting the presence of 2 living children, locking his eyes toward the only human lives remaining there. The vampire freaks out, screaming inside the cross for him to stop and explain what he just did. Hearing the young man calmly explain that he used the Echo Auxiliary formula, which expands and retracts the shield to scan for life, leaving the monster horrified after deducing that only 2 people are left alive in the entire village, with the boy confirming with a chilling gaze that as far as breathing humans go there are only 2. The servant gulps nervously at that macabre tone, as Carmilla's red eyes scan the street, watching our protagonist warn that the beings who are not alive have just arrived. Right as a rotting creature emerges from the mist, letting out a dreadful guttural shriek, Riku stares at the monster without showing the slightest hint of fear, standing firm in the middle of the street with an imposing stance, while Carmilla in maid form holds her cheeks, screaming in hysterical panic, watching a cadaverous villager shuffle forward, dragging his feet down the street, confirming in utter despair that the entire village has been infested with zombies. The monster screams at the boy to run, warning that a single bite will turn him into an undead as well, demanding that he attack and kill that abomination immediately. But the young man responds with a calm smile, saying he will not kill the zombie under any circumstances, sending the servant into a mental breakdown as the undead opens its maw to bite into the boy's neck, sinking its fangs with full force into our hero's shoulder, who simply glances sideways with a cold expression. A dry snap echoes down the street and all the zombie's teeth shatter, falling to the ground like little pebbles, leaving the monster drooling with a toothless and bloody mouth, revealing the activated barrier armor that protected our protagonist's body with lightning speed, with the boy innocently asking if raising a shield that fast is really such a big deal. Hearing Carmilla scream that molding such a tough defense requires insane focus and never happens on pure reflex. Ignoring his servant's freakout, the young man tells the zombie to wait a bit because he is going to fix him, holding out an open hand toward the monster, who backs away, startled, not understanding a thing, releasing a divine radiance that bursts from his fingertips, enveloping the cadaver's body in a monumental pillar of pure celestial energy. The vampire asks if he is using the same healing magic applied to the soldiers against the orcs. Hearing our protagonist agree, saying it is something similar to that, while the monster fires back, reminding him that zombification is not a disease and cannot be cured with normal spells, until the boy announces with utter casualness that the job is finished, leaving his servant hysterical. The rotting hand regains color and healthy skin in the blink of an eye, revealing a young human villager who looks down at her own body, unable to understand how she became human again, causing Carmilla's mind to completely spin out with her eyes swirling in pure madness. Rico explains, scratching his head, that he merely rewound the time of matter inside the space bounded by the barrier, leaving his servant losing it, saying that reversing time's flow with shields is an impossible aberration no one can do, making the vampire's brain boil with anger and frustration at her master's infuriating casualness, screaming to the heavens that he is the most annoying and overpowered brat in the entire universe. After that, Riku arrives before the entrance of the mysterious ruin carved into the rock, walking with firm steps into the dark corridors of the dungeon, bumping right into two zombies stumbling down the stairs toward him, with the creatures roaring their jaws wide open trying to attack. But the boy simply extends his hand and releases the flash of his temporal barrier, restoring their bodies on the spot and telling the villagers to run outside to safety. The villagers thank him for the miracle cure, and our protagonist asks what happened to them inside, hearing that they pressed forward until encountering a massive door in the depths, with the woman reporting she only remembers up to the moment they saw the entrance to the hall, while the others confirm that everyone's memories were wiped from that point onward. The young man rests his hand on his chin, committing the intel about the Grand Gate to memory, focused on unraveling that mystery, and sprints forward through the stone corridors of the dungeon. The silver cross on his chest begins to glow, and the vampire remarks that the boy is far too eccentric of a guy, manifesting in maid form beside him and pointing out that he cures every single zombie crossing their path, giving her master a suspicious look. Hearing the boy say he could not give special treatment only to the first villager and that it is no trouble at all, Carmilla grinds her teeth, remembering that teleportation magic is an ultra-advanced art, shouting how someone who only uses barriers can transport people with such effortless ease, prompting Riku to point his finger, teaching once again that every barrier is pure spatial magic. He details that raising a shield creates two isolated spaces, the inside and the outside, explaining that all you have to do is connect the origin space with the final destination point, allowing instant travel between the two spots and making the servant's brain short-circuit all over again. The little monster lowers her gaze with a grim expression, saying that the boy is just like them, making our protagonist wonder and ask who she is referring to. Hearing the girl almost blurt out that they are the high-rank vampires before biting her tongue, covering her mouth in panic and saying she cannot utter those forbidden names under any circumstances. She trembles, remembering that speaking of them would cost her own life before the clan, leading Riku to connect the dots and deduce that the ruin boss is a high-ranking vampire. Watching more undead crawl out from the corridor shadows, charging straight toward the pair, while the young man states with a determined look that he will uncover the truth once he gets there. The two continue descending the stairs toward the bottom of the dungeon, until running straight into the massive wooden gate mentioned by the rescued villagers, with our protagonist facing the entrance and stating that the time to breach the hall has arrived. Riku shoves open the heavy doors alongside Carmilla, stepping into the chamber, coming upon a gigantic throne room lit by torches and packed with armed warriors, where a sophisticated woman with blue hair, glasses, and a saintly mantle rests comfortably on a luxurious throne, sporting pointed ears and a calculating smirk. Our protagonist bluntly states that she is the high-ranking vampire responsible for this dungeon, leaving Carmilla in total shock, asking how he guessed, and hearing it was pure deduction from their earlier chat, causing the woman on the throne to narrow her blue eyes behind her glasses, while Riku analyzes his opponent, noting that her mana reserve is infinitely superior to Carmilla's. The zombie guards begin growling, brandishing spears and swords, marching in tight formation and leaving the servant terrified, not knowing how to react, warning that those undead give off a bizarre vibe of not being ordinary soldiers, and our protagonist casually agrees. Steel blades glint, cutting through the air in a coordinated attack, surrounding our hero on all sides with bows and sharp spears, making the boy notice their flawless posture and deduce they are martial arts masters controlled by the villainous. The weapons clash violently against the boy's barrier, showering radiant blue sparks, revealing holy blades attempting to breach the protective shield, making Carmilla shriek in terror, recognizing that the soldiers are ancient masters wielding divine relics. Hearing Riku let out an indifferent grunt that leaves the girl outraged by his utter coldness, calmly stating that the enemy's weapon type does not matter because his duty remains exactly the same. deciding to return the strikes in kind while the swords push against his defense. The boy triggers the projectile technique, releasing a devastating burst of barrier stars, launching all the legendary warriors through the air from the impact, drawing the immediate attention of the sovereign on the throne, who begins looking at the human with seriousness. Carmilla reluctantly thanks him for the protection, noting that our protagonist's barriers are straight up cheating. Hearing the boy mockingly justify that if zombies use divine weapons, it is only fair he uses divine barrier armor, leaving the servant completely speechless in the face of such razor-sharp logic. The dungeon master lets out a teasing chuckle, showing off her sharp fangs, praising the competence shown by the young mortal in battle, locking her icy gaze through the lenses of her glasses, meeting the unwavering determination in our hero's eyes, asking why he came all the way here, and hearing Riku state with authority that he came to seal her, drawing a mocking laugh from the monster, who considers his audacity a total joke. She asks if he mistakes her for one of those weak, low-ranking vampires. But the boy shoots back, saying he does not care about her rank because he only came to do his job, prompting the sovereign to raise a gleaming golden scale, calling the young man an entertaining insect. Standing up from her throne to toy a little with that insolent human, activating her celestial scales of Libra technique, wielding the sacred artifact that shines brightly, ready to deliver judgment in this battle. The bespectacled vampire then commands her servants to advance, shouting to slaughter the human as a colossal horde of undead pours from the darkness, rushing forward in a murderous frenzy, with the creatures roaring furiously, ready to shred the invaders, marching en masse against our protagonist and Carmilla in the center of the hall. Except the crowd of zombies slams headfirst into a massive barrier glowing intensely, getting pushed back by the luminous wall without gaining a single inch, making the servant notice in shock that even while blocked, they never stop pushing, commenting that this blind behavior is typical of mindless undead, while the boy observes the situation with a thoughtful expression. Seeing the red tide of monsters piling up against the shield, Riku opens his mouth and releases the command of his defensive magic, activating repulsion, which unleashes a monumental shockwave, blasting the entire horde through the air like Pain's Shinra Tensei. But dozens of other zombies keep crawling out from the dark corners of the dungeon, stumbling and dragging themselves toward the center in an endless assault, making Carmilla warn in a cold sweat that fighting these henchmen will lead nowhere. Hearing our hero answer that then he simply needs to eliminate the source of the whole problem, so he forms a new hand seal, firing the star projectile spell as a devastating straight-line barrier spear, piercing through the chests of the zombie bodyguards, attempting to dive in front to shield their mistress, while the vampire watches the scene unfold, raising her hand in a snap to conjure a spell, and fires it straight toward our protagonist, who gets caught completely off guard, because that shot pierced his barrier, nearly striking him, and the servant is left totally dumbfounded, shouting in disbelief that the invincible barrier broke, and our protagonist explains that the villain matched his frequency, locking onto the enemy with an icy and calculating stare. In the blink of an eye, the boy appears right behind the vampire, bringing down a sharp barrier blade that decapitates Libra in a clean cut, taking her head, hood and all, making the servant shout from the ground, asking if they finally defeated the monster. But the headless body raises its arms, catches its own head mid-air, and places it back onto the neck with a sneer, scoffing whether they truly thought a superior species would die from simple decapitation, throwing Carmilla into despair seeing that she is still moving, while Riku narrows his eyes and whispers that there is no choice left but to resort to that plan. The young man places a firm hand on his servant's shoulder, telling her he is leaving the rest of the fight in her hands and leaving the girl speechless, explaining he needs a little time to prepare a spell, and ordering her to hold off Libra in the meantime, making Carmilla lose her mind, shouting that this is a completely impossible task for her, until our protagonist transfers a generous portion of his barrier mana, making the little monster glow with immense power. The villainess on the throne smirks, ordering her servants to attack again, and when the vampire tries to flee, saying she is getting out of that hall, Riku turns around with a terrifying demonic face, warning he will end her life if she takes a single step back, making the girl grind her teeth in terror and fury, screaming with her mouth wide open, asking if he is the real demon in this story. Left with no choice, the servant curses angrily and charges against the horde, materializing two sharp barrier daggers in her hands, leaping onto the enemies with a battle cry, slicing the chest of the first zombie in a precise strike, carving up multiple undead in rapid succession with surreal speed, completely locked in on tearing down the creatures, while our protagonist watches from afar, approving of her performance, and begins concentrating his magic. Libra adjusts the hood on her head, watching the boy from a distance, remarking that the young man seems to be plotting something sinister and hearing the boy shoot back that the feeling is mutual. While Carmilla keeps mopping up the zombie soldiers at the back of the room, the boss raises her golden scales, announcing she will take the initiative in the duel, activating the sacred ritual to place their souls onto the scale plates, extracting Riku's spiritual essence in the form of a bright light blue flame, manifesting her own soul as a dreadful purple fire, placing both flames on opposite sides of the sacred artifact. She explains that she will begin a spiritual weighing test, measuring the soul strength and mental endurance of each combatant, where whoever possesses the stronger soul can impose their absolute will upon the loser. Hearing our protagonist confirm that if this is a test of willpower, then victory is already his, the vampire mocks his answer, but gets spooked when the plate holding the boy's soul crashes down with crushing weight, completely tipping the scale to our hero's side, making Libra scream in panic, saying she lived for an eternity and possesses a mind rivaling the gods themselves. Hearing Riku smile, stating that, not even if she forced him to take his own life could she break his resolve, and when the villainess backs away claiming she is immortal, the boy celebrates that the ritual served precisely to buy time, leaving the boss terrified, not understanding what he meant by that. A monumental magic circle of holy light opens on the ground beneath the boy's feet, unfolding celestial white feathered wings in the air as he summons the angel Suriel, revealing a stunning golden-haired entity radiating dazzling brilliance, an angelic warrior with a divine halo rising imposingly behind our hero's back, opening her serene eyes ready to purify all evil within that forgotten ruin. Meanwhile, the vampire servant lets out a ferocious battle cry, charging straight into the monsters with everything she has, focusing a sphere through crimson blood manipulation, releasing the blood thread technique that shoots out like sharp spears, piercing through the rotting flesh of the zombies trying to advance across the hall, impaling multiple undead all at once in a ruthless barrage. Carmilla flashes a sadistic grin, saying the monsters should feel honored to receive such a refined strike, only for a zombie to manage to close the distance and bite the girl's arm by surprise, making the little monster scream in fury and spin a crimson blade with her hand, cleaving the creature's body in half with a brutal spinning slash. The monster falls split onto the ground, and the servant screams, asking if Riku's spell is still not ready, breathing heavily while admitting that these zombies alone are nothing special, but taking on an endless army all at once is draining all her stamina. Watching dozens more undead pile up and march in her direction, fearing she cannot endure the pressure for much longer. But suddenly, a shower of white feathers and holy light particles fills the room, making the vampire freeze her gaze backward in shock, unable to believe the divine sight that just manifested, while Libra stands mouth agape screaming in panic upon recognizing the form of an angel. The angel Suriel hovers majestic and illuminated above our protagonist's head, leaving the ruined boss dazed, unable to comprehend how a mere mortal can command a celestial being. Screaming hysterically that this is an absolute impossibility, Riku stands tall under the radiant blessing of the angelic entity, quietly admitting he really did not want to resort to this trump card, reaching out his hand to channel barrier energy blended with sacred power, clenching his fist tightly as golden sparks burst all around, activating the spiritual link that shapes a luminous weapon, forging the golden guard and the shining hilt of an incomparable sword, wielding the gleaming divine blade with the stance of a true warrior. The villainess stands in total shock, demanding to know what monstrous relic that is, watching the magical glow radiating from the unsheathed blade, hearing the young man proclaim the name of the legendary dimensional sword Eternal Edge. Libra widens her eyes, stammering as she recognizes the sacred artifact from ancient times, recalling that this mythological sword was capable of splitting the world in half and was supposed to be lost forever, with Riku explaining that he forged a flawless barrier replica bathed in angelic essence, guaranteeing that its cutting power is completely identical to the original weapon. The boy takes slow, heavy steps across the stone floor, walking toward the throne wielding the sword with absolute coldness, locking his relentless gaze onto the vampire, making the monster break into a cold sweat and pure panic, desperately trying to back away only to discover that her legs are 100% paralyzed. Our protagonist recalls the ritual rule where the stronger soul imposes absolute will over the other, reinforcing that his order was for her not to move from that spot for anything, mocking how pathetic it is for the villainess to be defeated and trapped by the very power of her own scale. The sovereign trembles, pleading in desperation for the boy not to come closer, watching the young man raise the dimensional sword above his head while she screams for him to stop, bringing down a decisive strike with all his concentrated power, tearing reality apart with a dimensional beam, cleaving space and Libra's body in half with a clean vertical cut, A cosmic rift opens up, swallowing the throne platform, with Rico declaring that he is sealing the vampire inside the rift of space and time, stating with authority that she will never set foot in the outside world again, while Libra lets out one last agonizing shriek, being swallowed by the void. Then the temporal rift closes, leaving the hall in absolute silence as our protagonist sheathes the sword before the empty throne, gathering the remaining mana into the palm of his hand, while the angel Sarael closes her eyes and dissipates into golden stardust, clearing the celestial presence from the air and concluding the battle. Carmilla stands frozen with her jaw dropped in the corner of the room, looking around, unable to understand what she just witnessed before her eyes, noticing that all remaining zombies became completely motionless upon their master's fall, asking with a stammer if that celestial woman was truly an angel, and hearing Riku's confirmation. The young man turns to face his servant with a deadly glare, warning that if she squeals to anyone about this, he will throw her into that exact same space-time rift, never to return, making the little monster tremble in terror and swear secrecy. The vampire pouts sweetly, grumbling that she risked her own neck to help him out, asking with downcast eyes if he does not have a single word of thanks for her effort, drawing a warm smile from our protagonist, who genuinely agrees and thanks Carmilla, saying she really did save his skin. The little monster turns red from embarrassment at the direct praise, but quickly puffs out her chest, laughing proudly, saying it was all thanks to her brilliant performance in combat, stating he can call her Lady Carmilla from now on, and getting told by the boy not to get ahead of herself. She apologizes with an awkward laugh and asks why he did not use that overpowered technique from the start of the fight. Hearing Riku clench his fist and reveal that to summon this divine power he must channel Flair's essence, remembering the mystical and identical connection between his beloved and the angel, explaining that every use increases the risk of someone discovering the girl's celestial secret and drawing more danger to her. A few days after the successful completion of the ruin quest, the scene shifts to the entrance of the ruin, where a mysterious swordsman in noble attire holds the hilt of his katana ready to act. Standing before the solid stone door, the swordsman carves a clean opening right through the door, and upon stepping into the hall, he sees numerous fallen bodies. The warrior surveys the surroundings with a serious and watchful gaze, analyzing the trail of destruction and the defeated zombies on the stone floor, asking aloud what the true meaning behind all of this is, while a spiritual voice named Su mocks, saying the vampire's trail vanish right here. The swordsman Xian touches the hilt of his katana, confirming that the magical presence was cut off at that point, questioning if the monster simply fled, and hearing the blade spirit dismiss the hypothesis, suggesting that someone immensely powerful came here and sealed that high-rank vampire. Xian asks if there is not a chance the creature escaped using teleportation, but the voice assures him the probability is zero due to that race's excessive pride, asserting that the idea of a noble fleeing from a fight is completely impossible, leaving the swordsman thoughtful as he looks at the dead scattered across the room, pondering the feat of sealing a superior species of vampire, concluding with a hand on his chin that such a surreal achievement could never be the work of an ordinary human. The sword agrees with the warrior's reasoning, pointing out that this was most likely the work of some monster of the same caliber as him. But suddenly, the hand of one of the zombies claws at the stone floor, beginning to move again, causing several undead to rise, stumbling behind Xian's back, giving off a sinister reddish aura as they surround the swordsman in the dark, crowing together in a pack, trying to devour the intruder, lunging forward in a leap straight toward the warrior, who does not even blink with concern at the ambush. The ground begins freezing instantly in a crystalline sheet of ice, and with a sharp click unlocking the guard of his blade, colossal pillars of ice erupt from the floor, freezing all the zombies and the entire room into eternal blocks, gazing upon the creatures petrified in frost, wishing in a serene voice that they may finally rest in peace beneath the ice. The sword's voice mocks, calling the young man too soft, and Xian tells him to shut his mouth, right as the swordsman's eyes widen, sensing a faint trace of mana lingering in the air, deciding to etch that magical signature into his memory, never to forget it, knowing that if he ever crosses paths with the owner of this energy in the world, he will recognize it instantly, curious to discover the identity of whoever sealed a superior species, eager to stand face to face with the person who wielded such an inhuman technique. Meanwhile, in the city of Selodias, the scene cuts back to the Adventurer Guild, where Riku reassures the guildmaster that the zombies will never leave that dungeon again, making the leaders celebrate with clasped hands, thanking him for the rescue and praising his decision to hire him, announcing with a broad smile that he prepared the largest cash reward the guild can possibly pay. Several heavy pouches overflowing with gold coins are placed onto the table, making the boy's eyes sparkle, with our protagonist practically jumping for joy, thanking him with a massive grin from ear to ear. Out on the street, the young man stretches completely satisfied, celebrating that with this fortune he will not need to worry about expenses for a long time, until Carmilla the cat asks why he did not tell the boss about the superior vampire species. Hearing the boy explain that if he mentioned that he would have to reveal Flair's existence, making the servant agree as she remembers the angelic form of his fiancé, although she still finds the ease with which he defeated a high-ranking creature truly remarkable. The little monster asks what kind of enemy would actually be able to give our protagonist a real fight, and the young man reflects that someone immune to barriers and ceilings would be a huge problem if they existed. The cat asks if the girl retains any memories from when she is summoned as an angel, with the boy clarifying that she remains asleep throughout the whole process and remembers nothing. They arrive at the entrance of the inn where they are staying, welcomed by sweet Flair's warm and loving smile, who praises her fiancé's speed while carrying a stack of fresh laundry, making the boy shoot his servant a smug little grin, leaving Carmilla sulking before being scooped up into the blonde's arms, who welcomes the kitty with endless affection and cuddles, causing the feline to close her eyes completely pampered in the girl's arms. Riku pulls a dark, jealous face watching the cat get all that love, quenching his fist in irritation thinking he should have left a vampire locked in the cross, but quickly covers it up when his beloved asks how work went, and he promises everything was perfect, excitedly suggesting they go out to splurge and eat well since they earned a huge bounty. But Flair gently taps his forehead, scolding his spending habits, warning with hands on her hips that they need to save their money for their future, making the young man agree with his fiancé's sensible reasoning, until the girl glances out the window with a playful look, giving a wink and suggesting they celebrate just a little bit, since today is a special occasion, filling our protagonist's heart with pure joy and companionship. Heading out together happily through the inn's front door, the couple walks side by side through the bustling streets of Selodius, carefully picking fresh tomatoes and groceries at the market, while Riku quietly reflects that because Flair is a sacred angel, a crowd of greedy people will inevitably come hunting for her power in the future, dreading the terrifying possibility of seeing his partner torn from his arms, knowing that this worst-case scenario could easily become a dangerous reality. But looking at his beloved's beautiful smile, he vows he will never let that happen, swearing on his very life to protect their happiness until the end of his days. A few days later, a transport carriage rolls smoothly down the dirt road, carrying our couple and other passengers toward the Empire's next city, with Riku explaining that he does not want to leave Flair in one place for too long for safety reasons, while Carmilla the cat notices a hooded figure sitting cross-legged at the back of the carriage, warning via telepathy that the guy looks terribly suspicious and asking if it is safe. Hearing the young man quietly reply that for now there should not be any problem, observing the mysterious hooded man who keeps his eyes closed as if fast asleep, while the servant understands our protagonist is simply waiting to see how the stranger acts. The vehicle continues jostling gently along the trade route, and sweet Flair rests her head on her fiancé's shoulder, remarking how warm and pleasant the day is, receiving a loving and protective gaze from our hero, until a magical flicker pulses in the air, putting the boy on high alert. The vampire asks what happened, and Riku warns that he sensed monsters approaching, leaving the servant surprised that he can detect hidden enemies among the forest trees, with the young man explaining that he spread a thin barrier film around the entire perimeter of the carriage, noting that any creature crossing the line triggers an immediate alert and neutralizes surprise attacks. The boy smirks, activating offensive formula number 1, forming a hand seal of his barrier techniques, materializing several glowing spheres of the projectile spell around the vehicle's roof, firing bursts of sonic energy in every direction into the woods, striking the camouflage orcs dead on with surgical precision, blowing clean holes through the monsters' chests and taking down the pack before they could even get close. Carmilla drools in admiration, praising the efficiency of that absolute defense, saying that with this radar the boy is invincible, but our protagonist confesses he has an annoying weakness, making the cat curious to know what this unexpected weakness could be. Hearing the young man explain that his problem comes when the opponent is a human being, detailing that he cannot go around blasting mortals without being entirely sure they have hostile intent, right when a deafening roar cuts across the road, ordering everyone to shut their mouths if they want to live. A gang of armed bandits surrounds the carriage, blocking the path, making Riku point outside with a blank face, saying this is exactly what he was talking about, while the bandit leader yanks the coachman from his seat, demanding all valuables, letting 2 armed thugs climb into the rear of the carriage, a bald brute and a blonde henchman promising to spare the lives of those who cooperate, flashing cruel and sadistic grins at the cornered passengers. Riku sharpens his gaze with seriousness and concentrates mana into his fingertips, reaching his hand back discreetly, encasing Claire's body in an impenetrable barrier cocoon to safeguard his fiancée, watching the hooded man sitting motionless right beside him, who remains with arms crossed without showing any reaction beneath his cloak. The criminal's shadows loom over the carriage interior, and Carmilla asks if he is going to act, thinking the boy will wipe out that scum in a snap. But our protagonist breaks into a cold sweat, revealing that the situation here is far more complicated, with the servant finding it strange and saying that if the goal was just to kill, it would be easy, leaving the cat with a puzzled look, unable to understand her master's hesitation. Riku explains that his barrier spells were not made for restraining fragile humans, warning that any strike from him would cause a bloody massacre and he does not want to terrify Flare with a bloodbath, making the vampire widen her eyes, understanding his reasoning, silently admitting that the boy's barrier arts are far too potent for mere mortals, remembering that against monsters his strikes work perfectly, but against humans they would turn into a brutal slaughter. The boy also whispers that there is another crucial reason to avoid a fight, glancing toward the hooded figure beside him, revealing that he senses a bizarre and dangerous presence emanating from that mysterious man. The brute looks at the few coins gathered from the floor, spitting in anger at the pathetic haul, glaring at a terrified mother clutching her little daughter with all her might, both trembling in dread before the bandit's massive frame, until the ogre reaches out and violently grabs the little girl's arm, loudly announcing that he will take the brat with him as payment for the debt, sending the mother into despair, begging on her knees for him to stop, throwing herself at the criminal's legs, pleading for him to spare her daughter's life. Annoyed by the crying, the bandit grinds his teeth in fury, landing a cowardly kick that throws the woman onto the carriage floor, making the little girl scream in tears, calling for her fallen mother, while the blonde accomplice steps up, telling his partner not to be so rough with such a pretty lady, leaving the mother groaning on the floor, shaking with terror and disgust, as the creep grabs her chin in a sickening manner, sticking out his tongue with a depraved smile and threatening the woman in front of everyone. The victim weeps in terror at that disgusting threat, while the bandit lets out a hysterical laugh, thinking he owns the whole place, making Fleur explode with rage, gritting her teeth ready to charge at the scumbags, until Riku gently places a hand on his beloved's shoulder to calm her heart, offering a confident and serene smile, promising he will handle everything, while the brute holds the child in the back of a transport. In that exact second, Riku and the hooded swordsman both leap up furiously, shouting for them to let go of the girl, both calling the criminals scum, until they glance at each other sideways, surprised by the perfect synchronization of their scolding, wearing puzzled expressions, unable to understand why they spoke the exact same words at the same time. The blonde accomplice gets outraged at the sudden interruption, and the bald brute turns around annoyed, asking who on earth those two busybodies are. Xian focuses his golden eyes with cutting coldness, taking a calm step forward and telling the thieves to leave because they are no match for him, making the blonde bandit roar in outrage at such boldness, throwing a full power punch aimed directly at the swordsman's face, until a liquid spiral of water bursts from the warrior's chest, making the criminal's fist pass right through the noble's body from one side to the other as if it were smoke, leaving the thief in shock, seeing that his arm went completely through the man's body. The bandit frantically tries to pull his hand back in desperation, while Carmilla widens her eyes, stammering, unable to understand what madness is happening here. Hearing Riku calmly observe that the guy transformed his own body into pure water, leaving the little monster speechless at yet another absurd ability, the criminal grinds his teeth, cursing in fury, realizing in panic that his fist became completely trapped within the swirling vortex of water, while Xian asks from the side if he had not warned him about the difference in power, opening his palm in front of the enemy's face, trapping the bandit's head inside a sphere of water, making the guy drown, thrashing in agony and coughing desperate bubbles while Xian keeps him fully subdued. The swordsman watches the scene with a grim look, making the bald brute sweat cold with his mouth hanging open in fear, leaping out of the carriage screaming, asking what kind of monster that warrior is. But suddenly a hand grips Xian's wrist, with Riku stepping in saying he is overdoing it and that the bandit is going to suffocate to death. Hearing the swordsman ask why spare criminals and our protagonist counter that killing crosses the line, leading Xian to nod understandingly at the boy's request. The water sphere pops, and the blonde bandit passes out, hitting the floor, with our protagonist preparing to step down from the vehicle, asking his ally not to overdo his strength out there because he will help him resolve the situation. Facing the road where dozens of armed thugs continue surrounding the carriage, with the bald brute joining his companions, and screaming for them to slaughter everyone. Riku counts the opponents, noticing there are plenty of people to handle, while Xian observes the young man's stance with keen attention, and Fleur peeks apprehensively through the carriage window, making the boy think that for his beloved's safety, he will have to fight without using his barrier magic. Taking an unarmed hand-to-hand combat stance, though admitting he does not feel very confident. Hearing Carmilla remark that it is very rare to see her master so hesitant about a fight, while the young man quietly remembers that he has almost zero experience fighting physically without his shields, sparking Xian's curiosity regarding that peculiar stance. The bandit leader decides to leave the man with strange techniques for last, raising his massive sword against Riku and announcing he will start by cutting the boy in half, finding our protagonist with open palms and a low guard, leaping with a roar to bring the heavy blade down on the boy's head, who tracks the trajectory of the strike with focused eyes. Suddenly, Riku widens his eyes, surprised by what he is seeing, noticing that the bird's charge sinks to move in slow motion, catching the bird's wrist with effortless ease and redirecting the strike's force, rotating his hips fluidly to use the enemy's own weight against him, executing a flawless throw that launches the giant through the air, slamming the brute's face straight into the dirt in an impact that kicks up dust. Riku dusts off his gloves, completely pleased with the outcome, making Xian wonder if that was the legendary art of Aikido, while Carmilla remembers that this is an ancient martial art using an opponent's strength to subdue them. Hearing the boy praise the cat's knowledge as another bandit charges in swinging a giant warhammer, our protagonist parries the hammer handle with his forearms without taking any damage, twisting the attacker's body and flipping the guy upside down through the air, slamming the man flat on his back, knocking the wind right out of his lungs, finishing with a gentle tap to the back of the neck that knocks the bandit out cold on the spot, spouting another sword-wielding henchman attempting a sneak attack from behind, dodging the slash with elegance and landing a pinpoint elbow strike right on the enemy's chin. The rest of the gang panics, brandishing maces and spears all around our protagonist. But Riku hardens his expression and unleashes a lightning-fast combo of strikes, tearing out screams of agony, leaving all the bandits unconscious and scattered across the dirt road in the blink of an eye. Our hero blows on his gloves, letting out a sigh of relief for resolving things without bloodshed. Hearing Carmilla ask in awe who taught him such a rare martial art, with the boy revealing that his master, Love Marie, trained him for situations where he couldn't use barriers, leaving the servant amazed to see that on top of monstrous magic he is also an unarmed combat prodigy, while Xian walks over staring at the young man, and acknowledging the incredible mastery of the boy who just saved everyone's journey. The mother and little daughter weep with joy, holding their hands to their chests, thanking the heavens for being saved, while the other passengers bow in relief, praising the courage of those who faced the bandits. Everyone gathers around the carriage with the entire gang sprawled out on the road, and Sweet Fleur congratulates her fiancé on a great job with a radiant smile, hearing the boy laugh awkwardly, saying he only did what anyone else would do in the same situation. But heavy footsteps approach from behind, catching the young man's attention, making Riku turn sideways, asking what the mysterious man wants, receiving a cold glare from Xian, who bluntly replies it is nothing. Carmilla the cat gets startled and bristles her fur on the ground, sensing danger, warning via telepathy that she feels a murderous gaze locked onto them, until Xian asks what that vampire is to the boy, and our protagonist jokingly replies she is just his servant, making the feline whine indignantly, calling her master cruel. The swordsman curves his lips into a dark grin beneath the shadows of his face, remarking that it seems the young man keeps the creature on a tight leash. Hearing our protagonist calmly agree with the statement, until Xian grips the hilt of his sword, warning that the boy is far too soft, drawing the blade with a click and releasing a freezing aura. In a leap, the warrior brings his sword slicing through the air straight toward the cat, making Carmilla shriek in terror, thinking she was about to be sliced alive. Right as Riku's serious gaze flashes with lightning speed, projecting a barrier prism that stops the katana strike midair and asking the meaning of this, staring down his opponent with an extremely hostile and cold expression. Xian declares that non-human beings must be purged from the earth, including the creature at his feet, making Carmilla tremble in terror before that bloodlust, while the swordsman points his blade directly toward Fleur, stating with contempt that the existence behind the boy must also die. Trading a deadly glare with our protagonist, Riku shouts Fleur's name without wasting a single second, reaching out his hand and yelling for all passengers to run far away from there. Hearing Xian ask with disdain if he truly thinks he will let anyone escape, unleashing a blizzard that spreads thick frost across the ground around the group. The mother hugs her daughter in panic, shivering from the biting cold, while the travelers cannot even move due to the extreme freezing temperature, and Fleur calls out for her fiancé, worried sick. Xian orders no one to move on pain of death, but our protagonist roars back, activating entrapment, releasing a barrier detonation that blasts the blizzard and Xian into the air, catching the swordsman completely off guard as he gets launched skyward, clearing the freezing mist and leaving a clear blue sky open before Flare. Carmilla asks in shock what he did, and Riku explains he expelled everything charged with magical mana, leaving the cat amazed by such precise and surgical spatial manipulation. Xian lands on his feet praising his opponent's splendid technique, but claims unsheathing his blade that this too is an art far removed from humanity, declaring that the Fang Hunters will never allow such an aberration to remain free. Riku lets out a mocking chuckle hearing the name of the Hunter faction, extending his fingers and warning that he was not asking anyone for permission to exist, prompting Xian to proudly introduce himself as the warrior of the Azure Sword, hearing our hero coldly reply that he won't give his own name since he has zero interest in him. The swordsman offers a slight smirk accepting the taunt, and darts forward in an ultra-fast swoop with his blade raised high, making Carmilla panic at the strike's surreal speed, while Riku merely calls his rival slow, watching the katana come down tearing through the air with bloodlust, until slamming against a millimeter-thin, invisible barrier, halting the slash mere inches from our protagonist's neck. The boy flashes a smile looking right at the swordsman, then activates his barrier spike technique, making the kitty cheer right away, asking if the enemy was defeated. But our protagonist notes that he felt zero flesh resistance upon impact. Xian's body liquefies into water, nullifying the attack, and asks if that was all our protagonist had to offer, then raises his katana to strike. Hearing Riku smirk, wanting that of course he has way more cards up his sleeve. A pressurized jet of barrier energy bursts from Xian's chest, blasting the noble far back, making the swordsman drop to his knees, dropping his katana into the dirt as our protagonist glares at him. Hearing the man say physical attacks don't work on him and Riku counter that he is already used to handling immortals, raising two fingers with a mischievous grin revealing his true goal was something else entirely. The boy triggers the entrapment command, raising a barrier cage around Xian, making the warrior punch the energy wall only to realize his body cannot phase through the structure, with Riku warning that it is useless to try escaping because he custom-built this prison to negate his water form, leaving the Fang Hunter's swordsman completely cornered. With his hand dripping water inside the cage, the swordsman surprisingly confesses he never saw anyone this strong, looking at Riku through the barrier walls while the boy coldly asks what of it. Hearing Xian praise the boy's effort to polish a defensive technique to such an absurd level, our protagonist warns that it would be easy to destroy him right there at that moment, pointing behind him and promising to free the warrior if he swears never to mess with him or Fleur again. But Xian rejects the mercy with an arrogant grin, declaring he will break out of that prison with his own strength. Carmilla trembles on the outside, sensing a massive concentration of mana, watching the swordsman detonate high-pressure water blades in all directions inside the barrier, shattering the barrier in a strike that seems to hit the boy. Except Riku wears a calm little smile because he had already anticipated that cheap trick. He simply raises his fingers, keeping a sequence of multi-layered barriers active, blocking every single sharp blade of water, leaving Xian astonished, unable to understand how the boy remains completely unscathed, while our hero explains he prepared the defense knowing the noble would try to buy time. The young man warns that if the enemy keeps insisting on this stubbornness, he will start fighting for real, raising his hand and conjuring a black hole, making Xian feel the sheer magnitude of that destructive power, leading him to lower the guard of his katana, sheathing his sword and deciding to fall back for today. Riku praises the wise choice with an intimidating stare, hearing the swordsman promise that next time they will fight with everything they have, glaring at our protagonist one last time, vanishing into the roadside vegetation in the blink of an eye, with our hero telling the warrior never to come back as he lowers his fingers to deactivate the perimeter's magical barriers, restoring peace around the carriage. Young Claire sprints over shouting for her fiancé, throwing herself into Riku's arms with a desperate hug that catches the boy off guard, cheerfully asking if he is alright or if he got hurt in that insane fight. While Carmilla the cat points out it is natural for her to worry seeing her beloved trading lethal blows, making the young man realize with emotion that this was the first time Flare truly saw him fight. The servant finds it odd remembering the blonde was present during the previous battle, but the boy explains in his thoughts that he used a concealment spell to hide the past showdown, agreeing he should have done the same today to spare her the distress. While his fiancée weeps in relief, pressed tightly against our boy's chest. With the carriage back on the road, Riku reflects that Flare will continue to be targeted by enemies, understanding that it is not enough to simply fend off threats during each ambush, needing to find a permanent solution so she is never hunted again, knowing that this path will be extraordinarily difficult and dangerous, but swearing he will find a way out at all costs, remembering the sacred vow he made in the past, His memory travels back to childhood days, standing before the scorched rubble of his old village, where little Riku wept all alone, realizing everyone had died, staring in horror at the charred bodies of the villagers on the ground, paralyzed with fear in the middle of the storm, not knowing where to go, watching the complete destruction of the only home he had ever known, until frantically remembering little Fleur and sprinting off screaming her name. He finds the little girl passed out in the mud with a golden halo shining above her head, with celestial light illuminating the girl's serene face in the rain, making the boy touch her hand, thanking the heavens that she is still alive. Suddenly, a woman's high heels steps into the puddle, asking if the two are the only survivors, making the little boy turn around startled, demanding to know who is there. Coming face to face with gorgeous Love Marie, taking a puff from her cigarette and deducing their fate, stating that the boy was born to be the eternal guardian of that celestial maiden, while little Riku hugs Flare, tightly shielding the girl with his own body. The sorceress notices the dormant latent potential sleeping within the boy, pointing out that he does not know how to use this power and asking the boy's name. Hearing him answer with pure determination that his name is Riku, the woman offers two choices. The first is to hand over the girl and forget everything, but the boy immediately rejects the first option, leaving the second option, which is to train under her tutelage, taking up the duty of protecting Flare for the rest of his days. Love Marie smiles, revealing that the boy possesses an extraordinary and peerless talent, scoffing at the people who called him a failure because they only saw the surface, promising that if she polishes this rough diamond, his power will become the strongest in the world. The boy is surprised to discover he carries a special gift, asking if by training with her he can stay beside Flare forever, receiving confirmation from the witch, who asks which path he will choose, questioning which decision he will place into her hands. The young boy holds little Fleur tight against his chest, swearing never to abandon her, reaching out his hand to seal the deal with the feared world witch, who seals the pact by shaking our boy's hand. Hearing Love Marie celebrate her promising new little disciple, back in the present beneath the clear road sky, Riku smiles tenderly, remembering the sacred oath from that day, determined to spend his entire life protecting the peaceful sleep and happiness of his beloved Flare. Far away in the northwestern region of the Gaita Nika kingdom, stretches an endless forest covering the horizon, with tree canopies so dense and thick they turn broad daylight into the total darkness of night. Known across the whole continent as the dreaded Abyssal Forest, in the exact center of this forest stands a legendary gigantic tree, where frightened whispers echo among the shadows of ancient roots, revealing dwellers of the dark talking about the latest events in the world. One of the vampires comments in shock over Lady Libra's fall, recalling that she was one of the sovereigns standing at the pinnacle of their race, baffled that the feared mistress of the scales was defeated by a mortal, wondering in dread what kind of terrifying monster would possess the strength to fell immortal beings. But from high atop a branch, heavy steps break the silence, showing a warrior observing the conversation from above, making the servants freeze in sheer terror as they look toward the treetop. Coming face to face with a blonde vampire lord with piercing red eyes, a crushing pressure descends upon the subordinates, who begin to tremble, cowering on the forest floor without the courage to face the royal presence. Hearing the man call out one of the gossiping underlings, who responds terrified with teeth chattering from fright. Hearing the noble ask if the servant dared to feel fear toward a mere human, the subordinate stammers, trying to come up with a lame excuse, but the lord cuts him off instantly, commanding silence, releasing an invisible surge of overwhelming energy, suffocating the vampire's soul, who loses consciousness in that exact second, collapsing face first onto the ground like a puppet with cut strings, beginning to disintegrate into white smoke before everyone's eyes, evaporating into the air until turning into ashes without leaving a trace, leaving the other servants kneeling and paralyzed by the terror of immediate punishment. The sovereign raises his hand, declaring that death is a pitiful weakness of inferior species, proclaiming that vampires transcend mortality and occupy the apex of all life forms, clenching his fist enraged by the humiliation suffered, covering his face overwhelmed with wrath knowing a weak clan member was put down by a human, flashing a wicked grin and commanding everyone to heed his summons, ordering the subordinates to track down the whereabouts of whoever defeated Libra to restore the race's prestige, demanding they bring the killer alive before his presence at all costs. The vampire salutes, shouting and swearing to carry out the mission immediately. Bowing in deep submission to the feared Lord Sagittarius, alone on the treetop, the noble observes the misty horizon, reflecting upon a human whose power managed to overcome the 12 constellations, remembering the imposing figure of the world witch smoking her cigarette, pondering that if Love Marie were behind Libra's fall he could understand it, bringing a hand to his brow, lost in thought among the leaves, mentally scanning every city across the continent, narrowing his eyes with suspicion in the shadows, certain that he does not sense that witch's presence anywhere in this world. Recalling that even with Liber being the weakest among the 12 lords, she was still a pure sovereign, wondering who could possibly take down a being at the peak of the noble bloodline, considering if the new opponent might be some blood descendant of the legendary sorceress, or perhaps a secret disciple who inherited her entire magical repertoire. In any case, Sagittarius clenches his hand, swearing to crush this obstacle before it ruins his plans. Far away to the east of the continent where our protagonist travels, lies a mysterious island nation known as the Far East, where someone walks down the wooden hallways, that being the swordsman Xian striding in his white overcoat with his katana at his waist, until a mocking voice calls out to the warrior from behind with the nickname Waterboy. A muscular red-haired brawler throws an arm around Xian's shoulder, mocking that the anomaly got away, demanding the dignity of one of the 9 skies and saying failure stains the honor of the Fang Hunters, trying to get a rise out of his comrade with a scowl, while Xian keeps marching in total silence, paying no mind to the insults. Hearing the red-haired guy grumble that the Grandmaster's scolding will be brutal on his end, the two sit down respectfully before a large Japanese sliding door, which slides open smoothly, revealing the inner chamber of the headquarters, where a lovely young woman with long green hair and a dark dress looks back, waving her hand and asking in surprise if the two arrived together, celebrating the gathering of 3 of the 9 skies in that very hall, while the fire warrior mocks, saying Xian only came to report an embarrassing failure, making the green mage clap, finding the closeness of the 2 rivals cute. Hearing the redhead rage and protest while Xian asks for silence, warning that leadership just arrived, right as another person also enters the room, revealing a figure with shaggy silver hair and ceremonial robes, sliding the room curtain and stepping into the center of the platform, spreading his wide-sleeved arms before the 3 kneeling elite warriors, presenting himself as the Grand Master of the Hunters, apologizing for the delay and commencing the supreme meeting of the Fang Hunters. The Grand Master greets everyone present, drawing the immediate attention of Xian, Red, and Evergreen in the hall, who bowed deeply with hands flat on the wooden floor in reverence, greeting with absolute respect the authority of Master Sora. The silver-haired leader looks serenely toward the fire brawler, making Red lower his head obediently. Hearing the master say it has been a while since they last met and celebrate everyone's good health, the redhead flashes a relieved smile upon being recognized, while Sora sits down comfortably on the ceremonial cushion, taking the formal lotus posture to open the main agenda of the meeting, leaving the 3 elite members in silence to receive orders, announcing that he gathered the group to address the barrier mage, and requesting Xian's report. The swordsman nods his head and takes a step forward, reporting that during his travels through the Gaia-Taniga kingdom, he crossed paths with a young man commanding extraordinarily bizarre barrier arts, revealing that this master named Riku was traveling accompanied by non-human entities, having clearly identified the presence of at least 2 creatures, stating that no doubt remains regarding this suspicion. The 3 are left stunned by the shocking revelation, making Red blow his lid, demanding to know what this nonsense means, until Sora intervenes in an icy voice ordering the warrior to stay quiet for a moment, receiving immediate submission from the redhead, who shrinks back fearing the reprimand, glaring at his fellow swordsman with eyes sparking hatred. The Grand Master questions Xian on what he meant by 2 or more monsters. Hearing the young man explain that the first is a high-ranking vampire disguised as a black cat, Sora then asks about the other individual, with Xian reporting that it is a celestial maiden mimicking human form, making the leader whisper thoughtfully upon realizing the boy walks in the company of an angel. The warrior goes further, revealing that inside Riku's own body multiple beings are sealed, leaving Sora surprised to hear that the mage carries abominations inside himself, with Xian admitting he is not entirely certain about the exact identity of the creatures, catching the attention of the leader, who asks for details on how this is possible. Hearing that the boy erected deep multi-layered barriers to lock all these entities within his soul, Xian highlights that even without using the monsters trapped inside his body, the boy already possesses exceptionally devastating combat prowess, making Sora reflect that if our protagonist were to unleash these imprisoned presences, his power would skyrocket to even more terrifying heights. In hearing the swordsman's confirmation, the Grand Master turns pensive, analyzing the gravity of that report, trying to calculate the danger of the situation. Right as Evergreen raises her hand asking permission to speak, granted permission by the master, who allows the young woman to speak, flashing a sweet and cheerful smile, casually suggesting that the 9 skies unite right now to assassinate this monster once and for all, with Red agreeing that no matter who the opponent is, the combined might of the Hunter Elite would easily crush him. Sora narrows his eyes with coldness, while Evergreen insists with a laugh that even if they fail to kill, they could deliver a crushing blow to the mage. Before the silence that takes over the main platform, until Xian speaks up stating categorically that he is completely against that idea. Red glares at his comrade from the side in pure irritation, locking his bloodshot eyes on him, shouting what kind of joke it is to chicken out before an enemy. Hearing the swordsman counter that the organization's primary target is not the barrier mage but the vampires, Xian reminds them they must concentrate the group's full military might, focusing exclusively on the urgent extermination of the resurrected 12 constellations, leaving Red and Evergreen in thoughtful silence before the undeniable argument. The Grand Master agrees with Xian's reasoning, stating that the true purpose of the hunters is to eradicate anomalies and defeat active vampires, firmly declaring that this war against vampires is priority number one. Red gets outraged, asking in shock if they are simply going to leave the boy alone. Hearing Sora confirm that for now, his intention is merely to observe his movements, wisely pointing out that the barrier boy does not seem to possess a violent or aggressive personality, making Xian smirk in approval, while the flame-haired guy swallows his wounded pride, getting reprimanded by the master to calm down, and left with no choice he complies with the leader's decision. Sora considers that even while choosing to observe they cannot simply ignore the boy, deciding to appoint a secret watcher and asking if Evergreen accepts this special mission, making the young green mage flash a lovely smile accepting the task with joy, while the leader orders the other members to proceed with the vampire extermination plan, declaring the meeting officially adjourned and walking toward the exit, closing the chamber doors and sealing the fate of the new spying mission on our hero. After the meeting, Xian, Red, and Evergreen walk in single file down the fortress's wooden corridors, with the ice swordsman keeping his usual stern and serious expression, while the fire warrior keeps grumbling and the green mage analyzes the situation, placing a finger on her chin, thoughtfully pondering the boy traveling accompanied by non-humans, remembering that insane barrier master who not even Xian was able to stop, flashing a mischievous little smile, finding this entire story extremely intriguing. She reminds herself that her orders are strictly to monitor the boy without causing trouble so she does not get scolded by the master, holding a fragrant pink flower between her fingers with a teasing air, smelling the petals, thinking with a sly grin that playing just a little bit with the target won't hurt anyone. Meanwhile, under the heavy darkness of night in another distant region, a monstrous creature roars in shock upon learning that Lady Libra was defeated, revealing a dreadful abyss infested by thousands of gigantic centipedes, where a purple-haired vampire lord commands the nest mounted atop a giant centipede. Furious knowing her peer fell before the weakness of a mere human, outraged to see that even after centuries of sealing Libra weakened to such a ridiculous degree, while a colossal beast gnashes its fangs around the abyss, hearing the monster grind her teeth saying that defeat stains the prestige of the 12 constellations, furious with a murderous gaze that these mortals have crossed all lines, screaming from atop the monster that she doesn't care who the culprits are, swearing she will teach these humans the true terror of a primordial vampire. The scene cuts to the gloomy wasteland on the edges of the underworld, where stone pillars rise above a viscous vortex of evil spirits, with corrupted souls frantically trying to crawl out from the dark pit, forming a dreadful whirlpool of pure ancient hatred, from where a colossal creature leaps attempting to breach the world of the living, watched by gorgeous Love Marie taking a cold puff from her cigarette, watching a demonic dragon try to escape from the abyss. She blocks the monster, merely extending her fist without a shred of effort, landing a punch on the beast that generates a massive shockwave, crushing the beast's skull and sinking it straight back into the pit without needing magic. The sorceress wonders how many threats she has already put down today, noticing that the amount of monsters pouring from the abyss grows by the day, and sensing that something sinister is about to unfold in the world, regretting having her hands tied here while entrusting the surface's safety to her disciple. On the sunny road, Riku travels in the carriage with Flare fast asleep on his shoulder, guarding the peaceful journey as the vehicle glides across the green plains, until the young man smirks, narrowing his eyes upon detecting a presence on the horizon. He projects a luminous barrier prism into the air, startling Carmilla the cat, firing a star projectile like an orbital beam ripping across the sky at sonic speed, tearing through the clouds and soaring above the dense forest, curving cleanly over the crest of the distant mountain, spotting a winged dragon flying on the other side of the hill, obliterating the monster midair with a precise shot from miles away. The vampire loses her breath, resting her paws on the carriage woodwork, asking with a stammer what he just did, and hearing our protagonist say he took down a monster, sending the servant into hysterics, asking where on earth there was a monster when the sky was clear, hearing the boy casually point to the other side of the mountain, making the cat freak out. The feline stares at her master with little red eyes, asking if he is all right in the head. Noticing our boy's tense and deeply focused expression, commenting that ever since the fight against Xian, the boy has been way too stressed and on edge, with Riku looking down and admitting he knows that, confessing that he cannot shake a bad feeling from his chest, fearing the combined approach of vampire lords and hunter leaders against his fiancée. Carmilla rests her paw on the ledge, looking at the boy with hidden affection, swishing her tail and suggesting he shouldn't be so tense and should learn to trust others. Catching the young man's attention, who glances down at the kitty, while she reminds him that he has a noble vampire traveling right beside him, raising her paw in a proud pose even while saying she helps reluctantly, making Riku look at her emotionally, while the cat closes her eyes waiting for a moment of pure tenderness, until our protagonist bluntly tells her she is not trustworthy at all, making the vampire scream in rage. The little monster hisses, baring her claws, asking if he even has a human heart in his chest, drawing bursts of laughter from the boy, who apologizes, laughing in her face, finding it hilarious to be questioned about his humanity by a vampire of all people, thanking Carmilla for lifting all the weight he was carrying inside. The feline puffs her chest, celebrating that he finally learned to appreciate her illustrious presence, right as lovely Flare begins stirring sleepily against her fiancé's shoulder, opening her eyes and asking if she fell asleep again, receiving a sweet smile from Riku, who tells her she can rest a little longer, until the coachman yells, announcing that the new city has just appeared on the horizon. The young man laces his fingers with his beloved in a firm grip, remembering he was fired from the court but found new hope in a sacred mission, the absolute purpose of protecting the person he loves most until the very last second of his life. He stands tall in the carriage with a confident and serene gaze, knowing that the journey ahead will be filled with difficult battles, but knowing with absolute certainty that he can overcome any obstacle, keeping happiness alive by Flare's side with the divine powers granted by his master, ready to write the next legendary chapter of the strongest barrier mage of all time. And with that, we have reached the end, guys, so please leave a like to support the channel, because making this recap took a lot of work, and do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching all the way through.